Well, good morning, members, and welcome to the Isle of Skye and Raasay Committee for October 2022. Fáilte committee shores on the year in Skye agus Raasay and Daha. So, first of all, members, we've got apologies for absence. Alistair, any apologies?
No apologies, Chair.
Okay. Declarations of interest, members. Have any members got declarations of interest? Nope, I'm not seeing that. Minutes of our committee in 15th of August will be circulated. They were approved at the Highland Council on 22nd September, so they're just for noting. Councillor Monroe.
Excuse me, Chair, I missed the declarations of interest here.
Not hearing you, Callum.
Okay, so
no, still not hearing you.
Right, try again. You hear me now, Chair?
Yes.
That's better. Okay,
yeah.
I missed the declarations of interest.
Does anyone else manage to hear Callum?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it's just me then. Hold on, I'll check my device settings.
Well, we can hear you.
Right now, Callum.
Okay, John, Chair, sorry, I've got a transparency statement to make. This is with regard to item 7. Me and my wife have a self-catering business, and the short-term let licensing legislation will directly affect us. But as item 7 is providing a general overview of the legislation and is for noting, I will record a connection but will not be declaring an interest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I see we've got Alistair joining us. Alistair down there. Alistair, are you?
I'm not hearing you, John. I got the first bit.
I'm seeing that you've joined us. I wasn't aware that you were joining us. Are you speaking at any item?
All right, it's there to be. I think there's a couple of items there. The integrated transport report. Just if there was any additional questions on that. So I'm sort of, here. And well, if there was anything on the short-term lets as well, I guess I could do that. I wasn't aware that was going to be on the agenda. So I just requested to be here for the integrated transport report because of our work on that as part of that group, and also for the Sustrans work. I can bring any information there.
Okay, Willie, do you want to come in?
Or I can go away and come in at a certain time if that is more appropriate.
Well, just to confirm that Alice was part of the invite for Neil Young. So following Neil Young's presentation, any questions, Alice will be additional support for Neil should he be able to answer some of the questions.
Right, okay, thank you for that. Okay, members, we'll move on to the first substantive item, which is item 4, the Police Scotland Local Committee Performance Report. And I'd like to welcome Inspector Ross McCartney to present the paper. Over to you, Ross. You've got a beard since I saw you last.
Good morning, Chair, councillors and all. Very good morning to you. Yep, I've managed to grow one there, so how long it will last, I'm not entirely sure, but we'll see. I hope you're all well. And we will just go on with the police report then, covering the period of the 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of March 2022. I know it was sent out tail end of last week, so I'm hoping you have all received a copy of that. Busy period, you know, goes without saying, certainly looking through the stats and figures, and you know, we felt it locally. Obviously of note, the beginning of the period covered is during parts of the pandemic, which obviously will have an effect on figures. First on the report, you will see an introduction by our newly appointed area commander, Chief Inspector Alistair MacLeod, who's come across to South Highland from previously being area commander, Chief Inspector on the Western Isles. He has put his comments there, which, you know, to summarise, he's absolutely committed, as are we, as an area of South Highland, covering Skye and Raasay as well. He's committed to achieving the policing priorities set out for us, and in particular the road safety being, you know, a substantial issue for us up in the Skye and Raasay area, and also frauds, which we have seen an increase in, and can be extremely challenging for victims involved and also ourselves as an organisation to investigate the many ways in which these frauds tend to occur, majority of which being online. As I say, they're extremely difficult, and the majority of the time victims will not notice they are the victim of fraud until post-incident. Yeah, Chief Inspector Alison MacLeod, who I'm sure most of you will have met, is glad to be here, and we are over the moon to have him. So we'll look on then at the start, Skye and Raasay at a glance for the report. So first area to touch on is road safety and road crime. So overall, road crime offences have increased by 21.8%. That's 77.8 more offences against the 5-year average, and reduced by 19.4%. So there's 105 fewer crimes against the last year to date, which will be covered in this report, 2020 to 2021. So our figures for 21 to 22 have reduced 105 fewer offences. Mobile telephone offences have reduced over the 5-year average by 2.4 fewer offences, and reduced by 80%, which is 4 fewer offences against the last year to date. And failure to insure a vehicle against third-party risk offences have increased by 30% on the 5-year average. That's 12 more offences, and against the and reduced by 26 fewer offences in the last year to date. As I touched on there, road safety, education, enforcement absolutely remains a priority of ours. We have increased the amount of officers trained locally in speed detection equipment, and we also have road policing officers from the Highlands and Islands Road Policing Department visit us at least once every 1 or 2 months for a weekend of proactive patrols, where they usually come up for a period of 3 days, and they engage with drivers, making sure that we're getting the message of education out there, and also any offences detected are dealt with proportionately and reasonably. So we've had the local officers trained, an increasing number of local officers trained in speed detection equipment. We have local officers trained in drug detection wipes as well, which we are using, and also the road policing officers, all of which are trained in that specialism. So that involves when we stop drivers, if we get any indication that they are under influence of drugs, then we can drug wipe them at the scene, and within 5 minutes we can have a reading back, which will let us know whether that driver is over the prescribed limit of cannabis or cocaine in their system. So we're using that. A camera safety partnership. We've also had the camera safety van on Skye during this period and following that period a number of times, and we work closely with them and the community to identify any new sites that we can, any areas that we need to be mindful of including in our own local patrols plans, and also that we can let the camera safety partnership know that there's new areas identified, to see if we can get some sites there. Close pass. So unfortunately, during this period and since then, there have been no close pass operations. We did have 2 scheduled, but due to operational demands, one thing or another, they did not take place. What we have managed to secure is a local officer getting trained in running the close pass operations. So we're looking to get that done fairly soon, so that we've got local capability of taking that under our own terms and running a couple of close pass operations. But we do continue to work with operators of HGVs, etc., to get the message out there regarding blind spots, regarding cyclists on the road, and the safety aspects that we need to be taken into account. So for road safety and crime, that is the figures and what we're doing to tackle offences and educate drivers on our roads. Antisocial behaviour, disorder and violence, including drugs and alcohol misuse. So I've been involved locally in meetings with a few of the members on this call, and I'm also working closely with internal and external agencies, specifically around the antisocial behaviour and the alcohol and drugs misuse. I'm aware that we have had concerns raised from the community, be it towards myself or through yourselves, regarding drug misuse and potential involvement in drug supply within our communities. So we are working hard to try and tackle that, but also around setting up the Alcohol and Drug Partnership Forum, again, to look at how we are best supporting our communities, and if we are getting it right, and as multi-agencies approach goes, are we getting it right in support and education? So where that is at the moment is that I am in contact with Joe Ford regarding getting the Alcohol and Drug Partnership Forum back up again, and we're actually just looking to see, obviously we have a meeting in 2 weeks' time, and that will form part of that discussion on when we bring this meeting back in the near future. We need to make sure that it is, it's relevant to the communities. So in what way do we structure that, and in who do we have to include in it, and what do we need to be concentrating on to make sure that it is community focused and it's going to tackle the problems that are being seen in our communities. Overall, antisocial behaviour of the 5-year average reduced by 14.8 fewer crimes over this period. However, there was an increase on the year to date, 21 to 22 versus 20 to 21, by 5 more crimes, and that's on antisocial behaviour. And that can be anything from an antisocial behaviour fixed penalty ticket being issued for consuming alcohol in the street, urinating on the street, minor assaults, minor breaches of the peace. It would be a recorded police warning for minor assaults, but certainly they all come under this bracket. Offences in relation to common assault have reduced, 16 fewer crimes for our area over the 5-year average. However, have increased 3 more crimes in the most recent year to date, and offences in relation to serious assaults have increased by 0.8 crimes, so fewer than 1 crime over the last 5 years, and 3 more crimes. It's actually up 150% in the last year to date. So having a look at these stats for antisocial behaviour, disorder and violence, there's no particular trend in that these offences cannot be attributed to any specific person or in relation, have been carried out or perpetrated in relation to any specific reason. So again, we work hard to work with licensed premises and communities around the assault figures, making sure that we're supporting victims of all crimes, but also common assaults, serious assaults, making sure that ongoing support's there, and thorough and robust inquiries are carried out as to the reasoning behind the assault. But as I say, we're certainly not identifying any crime trends in relation to them at this time. Acquisitive crime, moving on. So overall, acquisitive crime has reduced by 3.6 fewer crimes against the 5-year average. however increased 21 more crimes against the last year to date. Offences in relation to housebreaking, so dwelling house, have stayed the same. That's 1 crime against the 5-year average and against the last year to date, so they have remained the same. And fraud offences have increased by 203%, which is 13.4 more crimes against the 5-year average, and increased by 81%, 9 more crimes against the last year to date, which, as touched on at the start under Chief Inspector McLeod's statement, we're very much committed to getting the message out there and supporting the communities of Skye and Raasay around fraud offences. Not only our community has seen an increase in this area, it's been felt force-wide, and looking at it, we have definitely seen an increase in online fraud. The messaging, we work very closely with our preventions and interventions, harm prevention side of the police, to get messaging out there frequently on social media, just to highlight that receiving emails purporting to be from businesses looking to settle bills, whatever it may be, getting text messages from loved ones to say they've lost their phone and they need money transferred to pay an urgent bill. We've certainly seen an increase in that, and as you can imagine, when victims of this crime receive such a message, it is in their nature to help a loved one without asking questions, and it's only after that money is transferred they then speak to the member of their family or friend, whoever it may be, or the victim then speaks to the business, and it becomes apparent that they have been a victim of fraud. So the messaging from ourselves is double check everything: emails, text messages, anything with a link in it. Would certainly be asking, on Google, do your own research around that. There's certainly lots of advice can be found on the Police Scotland website in relation to fraud, protecting yourself against fraud offences. And if you have any queries whatsoever, if it's an unusual email, text message, phone call, then please report it. One thing to mention as well is that these fraud offences are extremely challenging and difficult to deal with regards to identifying the perpetrators of the offences, trying to figure out where exactly they are based and what communications they're using to do it. Nonetheless, we are committed to bringing offenders to justice and getting that message out there to try and prevent frauds and acquisitive crime. Moving on to protecting vulnerable people. Overall, sexual crime has reduced, 5.6 fewer crimes against the 5-year average, and reduced 7.4%, which is 2 fewer crimes against the last year to date. Domestic related offences have reduced 9.6 fewer crimes against the 5-year average, and and have increased by 13.4%, which is 5.3 more crimes against the latest year to date. And offences in relation to hate crime have reduced by 100%. So you'll note from the report there that there have been no instances of hate crime noted by ourselves for Skye and Raasay, but we very much remain committed to identifying any instance of hate crime, encouraging victims to report instances of hate crime and supporting those victims. Domestic related offences, again, we work very hard with our partners to try and get in around that hidden harm, as it's called. What happens behind closed doors, people can be afraid to report it, and we encourage anybody in that circumstance, anybody that is a victim of domestic related offences, or feels that they're not able to speak out, we'd encourage them to engage with ourselves and partner agencies such as Women's Aid, also charities out there for male victims of domestic offences, but we've encouraged that reporting into ourselves so that we can support in every and any which way that we can in supporting people out of violent or domestic offence relationships, or relationships in which domestic offences occur, and we can bring offenders of such to justice. Serious and organised crime. Over the last reporting year in Skye and Raasay, offences in relation to supply of drugs have increased 11.1%, so that's 0.6 more crimes, and against the 5 year to date, that's against the 5 year average, and against the last year to date, there's been 3 more crimes, which is 100% increase in the previous year to date. Again, we have spoken about it previously. I'm aware of the concerns of our community, and we are absolutely committed to not only tackling the misuse of drugs offences, but working with partner agencies to educate, support, get into schools, get into wherever it may be, youth clubs, etc., and just speak to persons that attend, the youth, to try and get the message out there and support them, and also get an understanding of how are these offences being perpetrated. Locally, my officers have taken on the concerns, and we work towards enforcing drug search warrants or engaging with individuals that we have any information on to suggest they're involved in the sale and supply of drugs. Working with internal and external partners to just try and support people through drug addiction, as well as bringing offenders to justice on that one. Counter-terrorism and domestic extremism. So Police Constable Lisa Campbell, N Division's local counter-terrorism officer. I'll read this statement from Lisa as it's in the report. As the counter-terrorism liaison officer, CTLO, should you hear that be mentioned for N Division, I ensure areas have a local contest liaison officer who's kept up to date on the latest developments in the contest strategy, which is counter-terrorism. Lisa liaises with CT intelligence, CT security, and the Prevent Delivery Unit, as well as local area commanders, to address any CT related matters in the area and provide support to the area command if required. So Lisa's heavily involved in almost pulling all aspects together and making sure that locally we have an idea of what is going on in our area. If is ever flagged that we have any members in our area that are linked or have potential links to any particular groups, or persons demonstrating extreme views, we look to engage with that person to see how we can best either deter or educate. So that's quite a big ongoing piece of work for the whole of Police Scotland, Highlands and Islands, and obviously involving Skye and Raasay, should we identify any nominals who would fall under that bracket. So that's a general overlook of the stats for certainly policing in Skye and Lochcalsh. The report goes on to speak about various operations that we have running. For instance, road safety and road crime, which I've touched on, OPSEDA, which is challenge, educate, deter and reduce, and the driver engagement north. We do have, as I say, road policing officers come up on a regular basis. They are committed, along with local officers, to educate and enforce them. The rest of the report shows our detection rate, which certainly looking at it for myself, and I would hope you would agree, the detection rates are high, which, other than touching on the fraud aspect, which I've said is an extremely challenging piece of work that we continue to work locally and nationally around educating and ensuring robust inquiries to enforce that. but certainly I don't think anything else stands out from the report. And I would like to hand over to yourselves for questions or anything else you would like to discuss.
Okay, thanks very much, Ross. Okay, members, I'm not seeing any hands. Any questions for Ross? Hey, Callum.
Aye, thanks. Thank you, Ross. Thanks for the report, for presenting Chief Inspector McLeod's report. Thank you for the work you're doing on a day-to-day basis with your officers to keep our community safe. Maybe this is a question which might help people who watch this afterwards, but there's a figure for the detection rate against each category of crime, and I wasn't quite clear how some of the figures were above 100%. So for some 136% detection rate. Maybe you could explain that. Another couple of things for us. In terms of the drug detection of drug driving, that's an interesting one. And I just wondered, are you seeing an increasing proportion in terms of drugs and alcohol? Are we seeing more drug driving detection, drug wipes? I didn't know how you would detect, so it's interesting you're using drug wipes. And just another question, more not in the report, but in terms of schools engagement, are we getting a chance to go into primary schools and into Portree High School? That's my questions, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Drew, and Ross can maybe come back in and answer them all in one. Or Drew.
Yeah, thanks very much, and I'll just be interested to hear your response to Councillor Monroe about the drug involvement in school, or the drug education within schools. I think would be quite important, and that was one of mine. So also, I was actually laughing, or trying not to laugh, when I was reading the report with your percentages, because I find that I'm one of these old-fashioned guys that believe 100% is fantastic and 200% is impossible. So I just wondered the relevance of any percentages within your report, given the fact that sometimes it relates to one crime or two crimes. I think the actual figures are much more informative, Ross, than percentages. Percentages are irrelevant if you're talking of low crime, in my opinion. I beg your pardon. The only question, besides, because Callum's probably put forward the ones that I was looking for, is particularly the involvement with schools regarding drugs. But just I know this, and this is an out-of-date report in the sense that it's a good few months since that was completed, but I'm always just interested in your police numbers, your staffing numbers within Skye and Raasay. Are they at full strength? Are they below strength? Are you content, or are you not content? And is there anything that we can do, if you're not content, to assist that you have a full quota of staff available for duties? Thank you.
Hey, Ross, over to you for the answer to these questions.
Thank you very much, Chair, and Councillor Monroe, Councillor Miller, thank you very much for the points you're making and the questions you've asked. First of all, Councillor Miller, I'm going to agree with yourself. I'm certainly, when it comes to stats, I completely agree that the numbers that we have, 3 offences last year compared to 2 offences this year, is most definitely a better way of looking at it, and probably gives a better picture rather than the percents. Nonetheless, I get the percents in this report, so thankfully we get both. 136% detection rate. Yeah, so that comes out as a result of, so if we have 3 offences last year and we have 6 offences this year, then we're obviously going to be up 100%. The detection rate will be, if we solved 2 of those offences last year, we were running at a 75% detection rate. If we solved 6 out of 6 this year, then the percentage of crimes detected will be over 100% compared to the 75% last year. So I hope that makes sense. I was running it through in my head before you came to me there, Chair, but that's how we come to those stats. So as I say, looking through them myself, they're very positive for myself as a local area inspector, having discussed it with the chief inspector as well, the detection rates on there, yeah, figures are much telling and probably easier to get your head round, but certainly they're positive from where I sit. And I thank my officers, goes without saying, because without them being out daily doing what they're doing, the figures wouldn't be the way they are. So I know their commitment is there. Drug driving and drink driving. The drug driving wipes was something fairly new actually that came in and then was rolled out initially for road policing officers and then rolled out to some local policing officers in the different command areas. So the increase in drug or drink driving, we are not seeing a notable increase in that. Road traffic offences that are occurring, we are going to and finding that there is an increase in people drunk under influence of drink or drugs, which is reassuring. So the collisions that we're going to, my concern and worry would come if we're going to, collisions or road traffic offences, and they're actually they're showing an increase as a result of drink or drug driving. The stats on there are actually based on the proactive side of the police officers being out there stopping. So we're actually seeing that increase because we are stopping the cars, the right cars, I would suggest. And there's no getting around that is a very much an ongoing piece of work, has been many years before ourselves, and will continue to be to try and educate drivers around using vehicles and being out whilst under influence of drink and drugs. But positive in that we see the figures that we are seeing means that we are stopping the right people, and we should be. So the drug and drink drive procedure, yeah, it's a very good one. The introduction of the drug wipes was very welcomed, to be able to do it so efficiently at the roadside and to get that reading in quite a short amount of time. So liaison officers for the school. So we have dedicated liaison officers for each school area. That's been refreshed as recently as last month to make sure that the officers are touching base with their school. We have had a few talks. Officers have been into schools to do a few talks around drugs. What I will say is I had a look at the. So now we have, and everyone will remember this, we have our drug paraphernalia box that we take into schools. I remember it as a child myself, and the police officer would bring it in and we'd get a chance to look at it. And I certainly had view of the one for Skye, Raasay, and yeah, we'll need to have a look at it because it's there's a few on there that I would question their relevance, but it's a great tool to take in and show kids what exactly drugs look like, the majority of which thankfully have never seen a drug before. So the education wise, we are getting in and around schools. I'm in conversation with Tony Breen as well, just with regards to how best to give educational talks at the high school, again with our preventions and interventions. So from the preventions, interventions and harm reduction side of the police, we have just appointed an officer in the South Highland local command area, preventions and interventions. So that officer covers, and that is just within the last month, that officer has been appointed and covers the whole of South Highland. So Aviemore, Nairn, Skye, Lochalsh and Lochaber as well. But what we are looking to do is use that officer to travel around to build and support the work that cops are doing locally, to make sure that we're getting that message out there and we're getting that officer into the schools. So I know that PC Paige McDonald is her name, and she was due to come to Skye last week. So yeah, so that's certainly good for us that we've had that officer appointed in South Highland, and we'll be able to utilise that post to the best of its ability to assist with the school liaison stuff. No reduction in staff Councillor Miller, so there's no plan for any reduction in local officers. We have recently advertised 3 posts, which were vacancies created due to retirement and officers being successful in the promotion process and moving on to pastures new to take on the next rank. So there's no planned reduction in staff. As it stands, 3 posts have been advertised. I have managed to fill 2 of those vacancies, and we're just waiting on the officers to agree a start date for them at the moment. One transferring, or one local to us in N division, one transferring from a different division, and the 3rd post I'll be putting back out to advertise. But I'm happy to say that I get emails on a weekly basis from our officers, most recently one in Kyle, to let me know that when we're out there and we're meeting members of the public, we are speaking about the police, a career in the police, local people, and they're certainly drumming up that support and business, which is excellent for me to hear and get these names across my desk for people that can contact me. And again, I would say to anybody that watches this meeting, and yourselves as well, if anybody has an interest in joining the police, you know, albeit we cannot always, I have to plug this, Councillor Miller, but I would say that you know, we can't always guarantee that if you're to join locally, you're going to be, or you're going to, you know, be successful and get a post in the local area. But I'll absolutely try my best, and would love to speak to anybody that's interested in a career in the police.
Okay, thank you, Ross. Okay, one last question for myself, Ross. It's about visibility. You know, I mean, I think, and I often hear from members of the public, they say, do the police have legs? We see them in vehicles lots, we pass them on the road lots, but we don't see them an awful lot walking about in our communities. So I'm just checking, have they got legs, and can we expect to see them more walking about? Because I suppose that's when people really engage with officers, is when they actually bump into them.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. So my officers are certainly, I have seen them myself, being, you know, visible out at the weekends and in and about the licensed premises, the town centres and stuff such like. It's a balancing act, and I'll use that as it's a balancing act in that we are obviously mobile, which allows us to cover, you know, more area. It allows us to be out and about on the roads, and I am most definitely an advocate of park the van up, park the car up, get out, go for a walk, meet people, speak to people. If there's community events on, you know, go into the community events and speak to people. What we also need to be mindful is that when you're parking that vehicle, you're not too far away from it, because ultimately, you know, if an emergency incident comes in, we need to be back into that car. But absolutely committed to getting cops out there, and in doing so, we've had 6 local officers trained just this year in the police bike cycle course, because not only would I like the officers to be out and walk, but I'd also like them to be out on the bikes as well. And you know, the vision would be to put the bikes in the back of the van, come to an area on Skye, Locales, wherever it may be, and get out the van, get on the bikes, and cycle around, meet people, have a coffee. We have these mobile devices now, which are, you know, that we can do most of our police duties on, paper-wise, admin-wise. So, yeah, we have the tools to be able to be out there in the community, and it's certainly something that I encourage my officers to do, and we'll also take this back, the points that you've raised there, Chair, to them, just to make sure that we are doing that. There are another, I think it must be 4 or 5 officers, including myself, due to get trained in the cycle training. So, yeah, that's certainly going to be a bonus for us getting out and about.
Okay, thank you. Okay, final question from Councillor Miller. Nice short one.
Yeah, it will be a short one, Chairman. Yeah, I just look forward to seeing the inspector on his bike and be If there's always one to tell a police officer to get on your bike, so that would be a good. Just one sort of serious stat there that I've just wondered if you had any other information on was, which is concerning, I think, to most people. It's the number of people nowadays who are tending to drive without insurance. And I noticed in the report, particularly for Skye and Raasay, there's 26 fewer offences against the year to date. But do you have an idea from that just how many actual offences there were? Because that's probably more important than the actual fewer offences, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course. So let me just have a quick look.
I believe it's quite a problem nationwide nowadays, not only just on Skye and Raasay, but I just wondered, because that's, you know, the implications of somebody having an accident without insurance is quite alarming if you're the victim.
Yeah, absolutely concerning without doubt, and totally justifiable in that concern. But the figures, so it says 26 fewer offences. I don't actually have the figures on what that looks like the previous year to date, what the figures were, and what they are. They've obviously been down by 26 from, and what they currently are. So again, it's something that our officers are out and doing vehicle checks, generic checks. What I would say, see if you have any, and this is a difficult one because everybody knows we all have access to the DVLA website, and we can check, if a vehicle is taxed. If a vehicle is taxed, if a vehicle has an MOT, that's an easy one. Not so easy for the public or anybody out in our communities to say whether a vehicle is insured or not. So we do, whilst our officers are out on patrol, carry out a number of checks daily on passing vehicles to try and tackle that. What I would say, any concern at all regarding anybody you think may be driving whilst uninsured or concerns around the vehicle, please just contact us, let us know about it, and it's certainly something that we can factor into whilst we're on patrol.
Okay, Ross, thanks again for your report and for coming to committee. I'm sure in the summertime all the members will be out on their bikes and are happy to cycle around with you. And we'll see you again in the near future. So thank you very much for coming to committee.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
Okay, members, we're moving on to item number 5, Portree Active Travel Master Plan. And we've got Neil Young, one of our transport officers, who's with us. And Neil, you're going to give us a presentation, is that right?
That's right, Chair. Yes, if that's okay. Thank you. Music to my ears. I saw the cycling and walking talk, so we need to have a councillor cycle event at some point.
Correct. Okay, over to you.
Let me share this with you. First, hopefully, if you can let me know if you can see that. Okay. Perfect. Thumbs up there. Great. So nice to see everyone. Just as Councillor Finlayson said, Neil Young, I am the project officer for active travel. So responsibility for active travel throughout the whole of the Highland Council area. I lead a small team, but we're trying to increase the amount of active travel that's going on throughout the Highland Council area. There's money coming from the Scottish Government 24-25 as part of the Bute House Agreement, where we have been indicated there'll be £320 million or 10% of the transport budget for active travel in 24-25. So there's all this money coming down the line, and we need to be in a good position to get hold of that money as best we can. Just to set a bit of the context into what we're doing here, this is both in terms of local policy, in terms of local development plan, where it talks about promoting active travel opportunities and development opportunities to make Portree a more coherent place. This is what we're talking about here. It's the Portree Active Travel Master Plan. And the Skye and Raasay's future plan, consultation feedback we received from that had active travel as high priority, and this master plan reflects that. The two diagrams that you see just there on the screen there are really interesting. The National Transport Strategy sets out a sustainable travel hierarchy, which, as you can see, prioritises walking and wheeling at the top, cycling and public and shared transport as preference to the single occupancy private car journeys. So that's where all the funding is going to be going: walking, wheeling, cycling, and then public transport before private cars. And that final strategy was published a couple of years ago and is available online. And we also have to consider locally, we've got the climate and ecological emergency that was claimed almost 3 years ago. So emissions must be reduced, and we need to do our best to encourage more sustainable and active travel journeys. Hightrans, so our regional transport partnership, and ourselves, we commissioned Arup to deliver the Portree Active Travel Master Plan. That's one of about a dozen master plans around the patch, and that will act as a framework for supporting people to make those healthier, low carbon travel choices. So before we had the master plan that was in the papers and is now online. I'm sure you've seen it. Arup undertook a desktop review of the existing policy and strategy, took some of the baseline data, had several stakeholder engagement events, and actually carried out some site audits, both in person and virtual, because some of this was taking place when COVID was, I know it's still rife, but it was worse back then, a year or so ago. And the overview of the master plan is that identifies 3 kilometres of high quality active travel infrastructure. So that's infrastructure that's segregated from vehicular traffic, connecting trip generators, so schools and doctor surgeries, places of employment, places for recreation. Also identifies some pedestrianisation enhancements, some placemaking, some public realm, things that are going to make the environment more attractive, that will make people want to spend time in like so Summerlid Square. I'll come on to that just now, but all things to promote walking, wheeling and cycling. If you look at all the main cities in Scotland now, the Edinburgh, the Glasgow, they're some of their roads that were once heavily trafficked are now being taken over by spaces for the public realms, so much more improved, encouraging people to spend time in the city. And Inverness, we're hoping to go down the same route as well. Also identified as some key crossing points where at the moment pedestrians are crossing sometimes trunk roads, the 87, to reach their destination, and so we need to put in some improvements and crossing points, and they're all identified within the Active Travel Master Plan. And this is just an overview. So as you see in front of you, just the map of some of the interventions that have been identified, where green is the potential high quality active travel route, and the sort of focus green section is where there could be some public realm improvements, and that's right in the centre of the Portree, the main Portree area. 14 I think it was 14, 14 actions along with some estimated costings. Those included some easy wins, which are interventions that improve the infrastructure for walking, cycling, wheeling. They're estimated to cost less than about £50,000 per intervention, along with some more complex interventions. You can see there right at the very top, intervention costing in excess of £2 million potentially. And I think what we had before we had these master plans, while we were doing some active travel improvements, they were pretty ad hoc. They were just as and when some developer contribution came up, or when some community had a really good idea about something and the members supported it. Now we've got an actual master plan that has been scrutinised, it's been engaged on with the communities, and the communities almost themselves have come up with some of these improvements. So the hope is that these master plans are used to better direct where we can draw in developer contributions. Transport Scotland hold a lot of the funding for this. So if we can say to Transport Scotland, we've got the master plans, we've got a prioritised list of interventions that we want to take forward, Transport Scotland, give us some money to develop this. It's alongside your trunk road that's a barrier for active travel at the moment. So there's 14 in there. I won't go through them all, but you get a flavour of what some of the interventions might look like. And then they say a picture paints 1,000 words, and here we've got some safe crossing points. So just as the image shows, that's an example of what could be achieved at several locations across the Highlands, but thinking about Portree just now. Prioritising the movements of pedestrians and cyclists over the motor vehicle, providing safe crossings from residential areas to key trip generators, as I mentioned before, such as schools and shopping area. And you don't need me to tell you about the 87 trunk road running north-south to the west of Portree, and that's a single carriageway with 30 mph speed and a number of junctions for active travel users to negotiate. And there are various key land uses along the 87, such as you've got the Arros Cinema, you've got the Portree High School, residential properties, local retail. And it's proposed that a shared cycle track at footway level be provided on the 87 between the cinema and the Sluggins industrial estate. And if we can integrate Cycling by Design 2021 guidance, which suggests that shared use facilities most suitable at this location because there's narrow footway and the carriageway widths at points along the route would prohibit a segregated cycle route on carriageway. So a shared use path, just as in that image on the right hand side of the screen, and that will provide a dedicated active travel facility for school pupils travelling from residential areas of Portree to the high school and onward to the Gaelic school. I won't pretend to know how to pronounce that, but the Gaelic school, let's call it that. That will also encourage that route will also encourage walking, wheeling, and cycling to other trip attractors such as the cinema. People's short journeys in Inverness. We haven't done the same study in Portree, but in Inverness, there's 13 million journeys every year that are undertaken that are under 3 kilometres in distance, which are so 3 kilometres is for most people would be safe or would be short enough that you would cycle or walk if you had the facility. And I'm sure there's many thousands of journeys that are undertaken in Portree by private vehicle just now because there isn't a safe walking, there isn't a safe cycle route. So this will open up lots of opportunities for people to walk and walk on one cycle. So during the external virtual site audit and community workshop, there's a desire to create a pedestrian and cycle friendly environment on Wentworth Street and Bayfield Road. And it is therefore proposed that pedestrianisation is delivered on both streets, which will restrict vehicle access and deliver public realm improvements. Now, we understand we won't go just direct from what's there just now to this visualisation that you see in front of you, but it's a stepping stone. This master plan identifies this as what the public want and what could be delivered. Parklets, providing an opportunity to add greenery, flexible seating options, more space for hospitality businesses to have outdoor seating options in the summer. Any of the above improvements will make Wentworth Street and Bayfield Road more attractive and pleasant for people to spend time and walk, wheel and cycle on. Now, those improvements will be dependent on the delivery of the Portree Link Road, which will divert traffic away from the town centre. But that visualisation provides a high-level vision for what Wentworth Street could look like. Summerlid Square. So, yeah, stakeholder discussions indicated a long-standing desire to improve Summerlid Square. So it's therefore proposed in this document that public realm enhancements and a mobility hub are delivered to create a more attractive environment for users of the square, even for local residents, for visitors, and for businesses. And improvements could include things like secure cycle parking, priority crossings that reflect pedestrian desire lines, cycle connections to the square from proposed active travel routes around the town. Flexible seating options, again, could be used by local businesses, and space for events such as food markets, pop-up cafes. So I think visualization that you see is it's a high-level vision for Summerlid Square, and it's almost like we're only constrained by our own imagination. That square could be much better used, and that's what came out through the discussions with the community in the master plan. So a couple of recommendations, members, is that we approve the use of the active travel master plan as material consideration when dealing with development proposals and as supporting documents for funding bids. That's what we want to use these master plans for, is to draw down developer contributions from the developments that are going on. Able us to draw, as I said, potentially 320 million. If we could even get 30, 40 million pounds of that, 50 million to spend around the Highland Council area, that would do us so much benefit for active travel. For the first time since I've been in post 8 years, we've now got £650,000 of capital funding for active travel throughout the patch. But we've got the size of Belgium to try and deal with. It's not an easy fix with £650,000 per year, so we need to draw in that external funding, and that's where these master plans come to the fore. And the second recommendation is that Delegate Malcolm, who's also your area eco as well, to be able to draw down funding from Transport Scotland, identify these funding opportunities and get a delivery programme to target early improvements across the Portree active travel network. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour as to the master plan, and happy to answer any questions, members.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Chairman. Yep. Aye. I wondered, could I just, I missed a slide. You were through it so quick there, Neil. One of the slides you showed, I didn't get a chance to even see it. You just flashed it up on the screen and away again. So perhaps you could send us your presentation today, and then I can have a look at it at the leisure. Right. So yeah, I mean, obviously it sounds great. I don't necessarily agree with your suggestions for Winter Street, and I certainly, the square is an interesting one. It is actually, to be honest, used quite a lot for lots of things, especially during the summer months. We have a pop-up shop there most weeks. We have outdoor events. So there's not a lot, I think, needs to be done in the square. Certainly some tweaks here and there. But the Wentworth Street one's interesting because you won't know this, but for many, many years I had a business in Wentworth Street, and not long after I came on the council, 1994, it was 1992 or something, I think there'd be quite a lot of opposition to fully pedestrianising Wentworth Street, given the fact that there's quite a few businesses rely on people having access with their cars, etc. But for example, there's one hotel on Wentworth Street, but there's only access is on Wentworth Street. So I remember your sort of suggestion there in your presentation being, we were talked about it when we had a Portree Traders organisation, which I chaired for a while, and there was, well, to say there was an uproar when it was suggested pedestrianising Wentworth Street is putting it mildly, I have to say. But you know, attitudes may have changed now. The issue is that I don't have any problems. I think your suggestions for shared pedestrian and cycling along the side of the A87 is fantastic. From which was Aris is now called Lass, I think it is what it's called nowadays. But I know what you mean. And in fact, I had an email from somebody who likes to walk to work out in Aris, and of course crossing the 87 is dangerous because people don't adhere to the 30 miles an hour coming around the corner. So I think that particular thing needs to be progressed as quickly as possible. The slide, I didn't see, it may have been on it. Now the Bunskull Gaelic Force 3 are looking for safety routes for their from the school down to the A87 down Struan Road. And there's been meetings with the previous councillors, or two of the previous councillors, and the Roads Authority to improve safety on that road. So I suppose I couldn't see it. That might be on the slide that you jumped through very quickly. And I just wondered, what's your time scale for getting some of these safety issues implemented? Because I think it's quite important. The Struan Road one, I think there's probably concerns of who's going to pay for these safety what's the word, developments on that particular road. And also, which has come to light just in the last couple of weeks, for example, there's a planning application taking access off Hedgefield Road, which is a safer route to school at the moment. And that will need I think, probably need some input from the council regarding putting in safety requirements. So I suppose the timescale is quite important. And if we support this plan today, will that sort of kickstart some or speed up applications for money? Because I think there's some quite important issues that need to be addressed very quickly, and council services budgets are strapped, so we need to get money from elsewhere. So I suppose that's a long way around of asking when can we expect some work starting and whatever.
Okay, thanks, Drew. Neil, it might be useful to put up the two recommendations again on the screen, because we haven't seen these because when they're not being a report, so it might be quite good to put the recommendations up so that we can refer to them at the end. Councillor Monroe.
Thank you, Chair. I'll maybe finish off where Councillor Miller ended up, but I mean, I support his recommendations as I saw them briefly, but what we want to see is next steps. You know, what are the next steps? And it'd be good to get some momentum into this. And I think there's different aspects to this, but there are specific safety interventions at crossings, and which I think are high priority. We need to get these in. On the whole, though, this is what we want to see. This is the direction of travel. Summerland Square is a fantastic space. It's very, very vehicle focused, though, at the moment. I think it really needs to be redesigned, looked at. But we have to do all this in consultation with our community, make sure that there's plenty of communications. We're not going to impose any area where we put it all under grass or whatever we do, but we have to make sure there's communication in that. I think Portree Link Road, of course, is a key. We want to see that developing by this time next year. Actually, that's the date we have of autumn 2023. And just as Alistair Danter here from Skye connects on to, I mean, tourism is so important. It is important. Locals are important. Tourism is important. I think for the experience we give visitors, we don't want them to be, you know, looking left, right, craning their necks, where are the cars coming from. We want to create an environment where they can wander, you know, around the village and feel relatively safe. So I think you're taking that into account, Neil, I suppose, but I just think we're on the right lines. It's just looking to see where we go next and what our next steps are, and to get some of these actually happening on the ground. Thanks, Neil.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I am conscious Alistair Danter's on the call. Alistair, is there anything you want to add in behalf of Skye Connect?
I guess the thing is, well, similar to your own questions, really. I mean, the plan is there. It's knowing that we could access the resources, but two, I guess the other thing we need to know, I think that, you know, the way the sort of the political landscape is at the moment is that money comes on at quite short notice. And it's, you know, we need to be aware, our community needs to be aware that, you know, some money is available so we can react. And that's you know, that is a constant challenge, and sometimes it happens at different levels, because community organisations can be aware of certain funding streams, and the council can be aware, and quite often those are slightly different sort of channels of communication. So I think that's a kind of challenge, you know, that we need to work on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Neil, are you able to put up the recommendations again?
Yes, Chair, I'll do that just now, and then I'll just chat through them. Hopefully that's them there. Yeah, apologies, there wasn't a paper. I was on leave, and then there was but the presentation. I can certainly, Councillor Miller certainly will circulate the PowerPoint presentation. That's not a problem. Chair, do you want me to just answer the couple of questions about timescales and funding? Would that be okay just now?
Yes, if you do that first, Neil, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So timescale is imminent. We need to start. As I said, we've got this funding coming down the pipeline 24-25. We need to be in a position to have all the designs done for some of these projects. Now, not all 14 interventions on the Portree Master Plan will be delivered in the next 2 years. I can't guarantee that. What we're going through just now is a process with a consultant to look at all the interventions across the Highland Council area. So we've got, let's say, we've got a 10 master plans. We need to prioritise those interventions. We've got 150 interventions. We need to prioritise them. What's going to get us best value for our expenditure. We've got a small amount of capital funding, but we've got this opportunity of a lifetime to get tens of millions of pounds. 20 mile per hour is rolling out across the Highlands. We can use that as match funding. So we've got the match funding there for once as well. So every opportunity. I'll be pushing for some of these to take place in the next 2 or 3 years. Some of the quick wins we could maybe do this year or even this financial year. We've got a bit of capital funding that we can draw down. Some of the things are just signing. So some of them are only £2 to £5, £10,000. So we can do those, tick them off, say that we've done that. We've improved things just even by signing and a bit of lining here and there. So next steps is to identify the highest priority interventions from each of the areas, then get some design work drawn up, some consultation. Wentworth Street might be pie in the sky, but it was identified as an opportunity. It may be after consultation we decide, well, that's not going to happen, but it's just there as a potential, what could be achieved. So we wouldn't do anything without you members' approval or with the community approval. So don't worry about it. We won't just go gung ho like we have been known to in the past. So that's hopefully that's answered your questions. I will circulate the PowerPoint, and then the recommendations. We need to. I can't remember which councillor mentioned it, but we don't have the funding with the council. We've got some capital funding, but we're relying on developers. We're relying on Transport Scotland. We're relying on external funding wherever we can get it to get these things in place. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Members, in terms of the recommendations, are we happy to approve the use of Portree Active Travel Master Plan as material consideration when dealing with development proposals and as supporting documents for funding bids? And are we happy to delegate the Executive Chief Officer, Infrastructure, Environment and Economy to liaise with other bodies, including Transport Scotland, with a view to identify funding opportunities and a delivery programme to target early improvements across the Portree Active Travel network?
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, happy to agree that as well. I think that following this, that we need a discussion among ourselves how we're going to get involved and how we're going to make sure that the things that are urgent will be addressed, because we're all aware that council services are competing against each other, trying to save money, and so we need to have a discussion, Chairman, I think, sooner rather than later, as to how we progress what some of us might see as priorities immediately, given that we want some things done before next tourist season starts, that's for sure. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we could probably get Neil back to an area business meeting, and also Malcolm MacLeod, the Chief Executive Officer for Infrastructure, Environment and Economy, who is our local ECO. And as I say, we haven't seen Malcolm for a while, so that's probably an opportunity for him to come to see us. And certainly I would be hoping that they would be able to pay for some of the active travel schemes through some of the on-street parking income that we generate on the island, because that's what that income is actually there to support. So I think that's a conversation we can have.
Once again, I'm agreeing with you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Neil, last word.
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, more than happy to attend a future area business meeting. I just wondered, it's okay to ask Alistair just to give you a little update now on the integrated Skye transport plan as well. That was I'll stop sharing my screen, but that's a separate piece of work, but it's been funded through Sustrans, but it all combines to improve the travel around the patch.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, Alistair.
Yes, sorry, I think there's a bit of confusion here, Neil, between the integrated transport plan that was put together by Arup for the whole island and where Sustrans can fit within that. So my understanding was that today you were going to say a bit more about that, because it was presented to the members during PERDA, at which time they noted it but couldn't take it any further. So if you started with that, I can then add in the Sustrans thing. Is that okay?
I think, Chair, I think what we'll do is we'll need to come back to a future meeting, because I am not up to speed with where we are with the integrated transport plan. Hightrans have been leading that, Neil McRae and others, so I'm not in a position to really give much of an update today, I'm afraid.
Okay, are you happy with that, Alistair? Willie can arrange for you to come to an area business meeting and we can move it forward from there.
Yes, I don't think there's not been any change in that particular plan, and I would just say that the Sustrans work that we've been doing is pretty much nearing completion. We'd hope to have a final report by the end of this month. So yeah.
Okay, given that, okay, thank you, Neil, for your attendance, and it's very clear we're going to see you soon on a number of fronts.
Thank you, members.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, we're moving on to item 6. Willie, do we know if Mary's with us?
Yes, she is the chair.
Okay, so I'd like to welcome Mary MacDonald to Area Committee. Mary is our new Area Education Manager following Don Esson's retirement. And I thought it was important for Mary to attend, just to introduce herself, to meet with members, and basically to give us a very short overview of the priorities for the ASG, and answer any questions that members have. So over to you, Mary.
Thank you, Councillor Finlayson. Yeah, it's good to have been invited along this morning, and to meet other officers as well, and to find out all about the Skye and Raasay committee and how it operates. So in terms of the priorities for our ASG, that would be very much in line with the raising attainment, and I know most of the members would have seen the report that went to Education Committee at the end of September, and the priorities for the council as a whole. And obviously our schools will be working closely with our collaborative lead officers and looking at the literacy and numeracy in particular. And I think when I've looked at the school improvement plans that have come in from our schools across the ASG, those are very much the priorities that schools themselves have identified as well. In terms of our collaborative lead officers, obviously we've been in a bit of a strange position for Skye and Raasay, because there's been nobody stepping into my shoes since I came into post in August. But on Friday there were interviews, so we now have 2 collaborative lead officers for the West Highland. That's Kirsty Clark and Kerry Young, who will be new to the post. Kerry is currently head teacher at Banavie in Fort William. So I'm meeting with Kerry later today just to get a start date for her, and then work out with Kirsty and Kerry how we'll be working in what schools each of them will be working with Councillor Finlayson. So that's going to give a bit more stability, I think, for the schools in Skye and Raasay, having another collaborative lead officer that will be working alongside myself as well. And the other good news was, and finally on Friday we appointed to the tri-cluster of McDermott, Edinburgh and Knockbrek. Fiona Goss has accepted the offer of the post. Fiona currently works in Aberdeen, but we'll have a 4-week notice period. So my education support officer will be in touch with Fiona today to get a start date with her. And the good news was we got accommodation for Fiona. So that was really, really positive for all the parents as well, to be able to share that. Councillor, I don't know if you want me to speak any more about the attainment agenda for the council, or.
Okay, well, maybe no. I mean, I think that's really useful, and we might get members just to come in with questions. In terms, Mary, of the collaborative lead officers, so will either Kirsty or Kerry have a responsibility for the Skye area, or will they divvy it up between them?
No, I think it works much better, Councillor Finlayson, when it's the one collaborative lead. Kirsty actually has family who live in Portnalong, so I'm hoping it will be herself. That she's already had links with Katie White at Slate and Sam Ewer, Carbiston and Vegan. She's been already working with them. So in my head, that I would see Kirsty as being the collaborative lead for Skye and Raasay. Okay,
and my other question, Mary, is absolutely, I mean, raising attainment has to be the key priority for all our schools in Highland. And going forward in the new year, we're going to be taking attainment reports to area committees. Is there anything you want to say round about that? I'm assuming it'll be both ACEL data and national qualifications.
That's right, it will be both, Councillor Finlayson. So the ACEL data is for our primary 1, 4 and 7 pupils, and S3 as well, so that's your broad general education. And again, in our smaller schools, it's sometimes difficult to get a proper picture because you might only have 4 or 5 primary 7s one year, and you might have had 1 the previous year. So we take all that into account, but I think what's going to be important is that we look at the data across the ASG and try and gather a much bigger picture of what's happening across our ASG and how schools are actually engaging in the professional learning that's now being offered, particularly in relation to literacy. I think there's a really strong package there from the authority in terms of raising attainment in literacy, and I'll certainly be looking to see how engaged our schools are with that.
Okay, and my last question, Mary, is so in terms of assessment and moderation, obviously the small rural school agenda, it makes it sometimes difficult. Are we managing to support the smaller rural schools in terms of their peers from other schools being able to work with them on things like assessment and moderation? So, which again, obviously feed into the raising attainment agenda.
That's right. I think in terms of moderation, Councillor Finlayson, it's so much easier now, and schools are using our teams set up to work with each other. Education Scotland have been very involved as well at rolling out the moderation training across Highland, and our schools have been very much part of that. And I think I would say there's been a period of instability perhaps in our schools on Skye. There's been a number of acting head teacher posts, but now we have Sam Muir, head teacher of Dunvegan and Carbis. That's a new cluster. We now have Fiona as head teacher of our tri-cluster, and Sarah Matheson is going to be returning to Portree Primary School in January as head teacher. So I think I'm very positive about this period of stability will certainly help schools focus on the strategic aims that are so important as well, rather than just a lot of time in the operational. So I think with our head teachers actually being properly in place now, that will definitely make a difference as well in moving forward.
Thank you, Mary. Any other members got any comments or questions for Mary? I'm not seeing any hands. Councillor Monroe.
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief welcome to Mary to the committee, area committee, and good to see you in post. And of course, I've seen you once or twice in the last few months, Mary. Just picking up on what you said there with stability, that sounds like we've got some stability in our leadership in our schools. I just wondered, in terms of recruitment, there is obviously issues in terms of recruitment of teachers. Are you finding that with other school posts in the Scolchinari, the preschool, or in PSA? Are we managing to recruit to the posts we have, or is that again quite a tricky situation? Thanks, Mary.
It's definitely challenging, Councillor Monroe, and I know the authority as a whole are seeking to put things in place, especially when it comes to our GM. And I know I'm work closely with Lena Walker and trying to support schools who find themselves in difficult situations with regard to GM posts. And it's not just on Skye, and it would appear to be a national issue that even the Scottish Government, I know Lena Walker earlier this session was in touch with the Scottish Government with regard to some suggestions that our Portree ASG had actually put to her in terms of trying to improve the way posts were even advertised. But the advice was that it had to remain as it is at present, but that they would look in the future if these issues were to persist. So it's definitely, that's one of our biggest challenges, is definitely recruiting staff. And I think that's why I was so delighted I managed to get the because accommodation, housing, that's the kind of biggest issue, the cost of housing, and getting. So the fact that we got, even in terms of our head teacher posts across, I would say, West Highlands, it's probably a reducing number of applicants that we're seeing and going for the posts. But it's something we're very, very aware of, and I know that the authority are very much aware of the situation, and certainly with Lena Walker doing what we can, and even say reaching out to Scottish Government earlier this year, and that was a result. Nicky Grant actually met with the Portree ASG to listen to their concerns around the staffing and recruitment. So that was really good. I think they all felt that we're very much listened to as well, which was good to hear.
Hey, Councillor Miller.
Morning, Mary. How are you today?
Morning, Councillor Miller.
Oh, thank you. Always been a problem, and I'm sure most of all Councillor Finlayson is well aware of it, is the retention of probationers who are, certainly when we get good probationers, we don't seem to be able to offer them a full-time career, and they want to stay in Skye. So I think hopefully that you'll be able to maybe massage the organisation to allow us, perhaps if you do come across good probationers who are in post and who want to stay, that we can keep them. Because as you know, and John certainly knows, Councillor Finlayson knows, for years we've had good ones and we've had to allow them to move on because we couldn't keep them. So I suppose that's a problem Highland wide as well as anything else. It's an issue. I just wondered if it's possible that you could maybe even update us, if you can, on the latest incident at Boonscall Gaelic Portree, because obviously the councillors are aware, the press are sniffing around, and we want to be able to. I don't want to respond to them certainly anyway, but I just wondered, is there anything that we can be told about that would be confidential?
I think corporate comms, I know, have been in touch. Corporate communications department have been in touch with one of our local papers today, Councillor Miller, just with an update.
Fine.
So I think things are progressing well. I think that's all I can.
Yeah,
I could say in this meeting. But I was in the school last week following the incident, so I've been there and spoken with the staff, who are obviously been quite affected by what happened.
No, that's fine, because it's a bit of a, just in case. I certainly wouldn't be speaking to them, but I just wondered, the other thing on the Struan school. I know we're supposed to be going to a meeting tonight and it's been cancelled. I'm sure you're aware of that.
That's right.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm going to attend on Friday. I think it's been changed to this Friday, so I'm going to go along on Friday evening to that.
No, I'm no questions really. I've met Mary a few times, and we're just giving as much support as certainly as I can, and I'm sure the rest of us will be the same. But it's good that we've got extra staff coming, and your suggestion of the lead there being responsible for all the schools in Skye would be a bonus, I think. And I'm sure there will be a discussion between Councillor Finlayson and myself and members of the senior education about how we can attract more applicants for jobs, the head teachers on Skye and O'Halshin, and though it's a national problem, but I think we need to be able to work together to make sure that we can try and enhance the situation to attract people to come here. So it's a difficult one, but no, welcome to the meeting anyway.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and I think the point you raised there, Drew, about probationers, I suppose the challenge we've got is that teaching is quite unique in that people are guaranteed a post for a year. But the following year, there's another batch of probationers who have also got the same entitlement. So I suppose if you've got 5 jobs and you've got 5 probationers in the post, and then the next 10 come along, so it's we do try as far as possible, but we have got commitments that we have to take probationers year on year. And then I suppose after the year's probationary, they're in the job market like everyone else. But it is important, where we've got young people who want to stay in the Highlands and on Skye, that we do try and encourage them. So that's certainly workforce planning, something workforce planning are continually talking to me about it, and I'll pass on your concern.
Okay, I mean, I've done it myself, John, for years, as you know, and we've had some fantastic probationers who left because for the reasons you've just given, and but who were keen to stay, and then the following year probationers came and they were desperate to go away after that year because they wanted to go back to the city life, and it's a bit of a catch-22, but I think we have to maybe figure out a way how we can perhaps adjust that or massage it so that we can actually keep the ones that want to stay, because it's so sad to see people who want to stay, sorry, but your job's up after 12 months. And then, you know, we get people who just, they're here because they've been given this post and then they want to get away as quickly as possible. So I don't know if we can change it, but it's certainly something we should be trying to do. And I acknowledge your experience because you're the expert.
Well, I'll note that comment that you've just made. Mary, thank you very much for giving us your time, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year and our attainment discussions. And I think, as Councillor Murrell said, we're delighted to have you on board, and you know where we are and we know where you are.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all. Bye for now. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 7. It's the introduction of short-term lets, and this is about an overview of the short-term lets legislation and how it's being implemented by the Highland Council, because as we all know, it's now across Scotland, and it'd be good to hear what's happening in our own. And I've got Ian Meredith, who's going to present. Ian's from the licensing department, so over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So I've been asked to come along just to give you an overview of short-term let licensing and how it's being implemented, where it's come from and how it's being implemented in the Highland area. As you just said, Chair, this is something that's implemented across Scotland, but has a particular impact on the Highlands. And within the Highlands has a particular impact on Skye with a lot of these properties in your area. So what I intend to do is just go through quickly go through a sort of presentation. I've got a few slides, and we've been attending. We tried to attend meetings with people who are in the trade. A couple of weeks ago we attended a meeting put on by Airbnb that had I think around 150 of their hosts attending. So there's quite a lot of information, but what I'll do is I'll just go through it. It should give you an overview. I'll give the slides to Alistair. Perhaps you can circulate them so you sort of have that information to hand, and then you have the same information that we've been trying to sort of push out to the trade. And then afterwards, I'm happy to answer any questions. Just to mention as well before I start, we also have in the meeting Gary Summers, who is our newest member of staff. So new, he just started today, and he's another solicitor in the team, and he will be taking on responsibility for short-term lets primarily within the licensing team. So if I just get the presentation up, I will share my screen. There we go.
Yeah, we got that.
There we go. Hopefully you can see that. Okay. Grand. So can you see that as a presentation? Sorry.
Yeah, we're seeing, you know, all your slides down the side. We're not seeing the slideshow version, but it's okay. So I think we're sure that'll do us.
That's fine. I'll do that. Grand. Is that moving through the slides, or are you still just seeing the whole screen?
We're just seeing your first slide, and we're not seeing. Alistair or Willie, can you advise Ian? Okay, we're on to the second one now. That's
fine. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not sharing properly, but I'll just go through this, and as I say, I'll share the slides with you. So, the short-term let license scheme. So it's a new mandatory scheme. There are some areas of licensing that local authorities have the choice over whether they want to license the activity or not. Short-term let's mandatory, introduced by the Scottish Government, and it had to be established by the 1st of October. So prior to this, there's been no requirement to license short-term lets, and therefore local authorities had no control over them, didn't have the ability to regulate them, deal with kind of complaints, antisocial behaviour, inappropriate properties, things like that. So that is essentially what will be covered by the scheme. So the aim is to ensure that the properties themselves are safe, that local authorities can address issues that are faced by neighbours, and also to give local authorities a bit more information about what's happening in their area, because again, before we had no way of knowing how many properties, how many of these types of properties were in our area. It also helps us to ensure that the people who are providing these lets are suitable to be conducting that kind of business as well. And the aim of the legislation is to sort of balance the benefits of short-term lets with the needs of the communities and the need for regulation. So it covers a wide range of residential accommodation, so it includes but not exclusively self-catering properties, B&Bs, glamping pods, those kind of things. So in terms of what a short-term let is, despite the name, it's not based on how long someone is staying in a property. There's a definition within the legislation, which is it's residential accommodation, so accommodation where people stay overnight, provided by a host in their course of business to a guest where the following criteria are met. So again, all this criteria is set out in the legislation. So it's not the guest's only or principal home. It's for commercial consideration. So if you're doing it for free, if you're not charging, then you don't need a license. The guest is not an immediate family member. They're not staying there for education or school or college reasons. It's not approved by them. The guest doesn't own or part own the accommodation. It's not provided for the provision of work or services by the guest to a host or member of the household. So for example, if you had someone staying, say you had an au pair or something, staying in the property, you're paying them to conduct services within your home. You don't need a license for that, and it is not an excluded property. Now, again, there's a list of excluded properties. This can lead to, we've had quite a lot of queries from potential applicants inquiring as to whether their property should be licensed. So if it is an apart hotel, if they have a liquor license with accommodation, if it's a hotel or a hostel, residential accommodation, a care home, a hospital, a nursing home, residential school, prison, refuge, student accommodation, or accommodation which otherwise requires a license for use for overnight stays. So for example, a caravan site license. If it's any of those, it doesn't need a short-term license, so they are excluded. Also excluded is accommodation, if accommodation is provided by the guest. So if they bring a tent and stay in your on your land, doesn't require to be licensed. Mobile accommodation, canal boats, yachts, bothies, and accommodation owned by an employer, provided in terms of a contract for performance of the duties. So those don't require licenses, and also a number of tenancies. If the person is staying at the property under a tenancy rather than under a contract, then they will not require a short-term let license. So in terms of applying for the license, the host or the operator, which is usually the person who owns the business, can apply. Their solicitor or agent can apply on their behalf. If the person applying doesn't own the property, they need to get the consent of everyone who does own the property in order to make an application. So in terms of the different types of license, there are 4 different types that people can apply for. There's home sharing, which is letting out all or part of your home while you're there. So a B&B where you live there and you have guests coming and stay, but you still live there full time. That's a home share. A home let, so that's your house. Quite a lot of people use this if they work away. Say someone works offshore and while they're away, they want to let out their own house for, say, holiday lets. That would be a home letting. You can combine the two, or secondary letting, which is a property you don't normally live in that you let out. So if you have a second home that is a self-catering premises, if you have glamping pods, that kind of thing, then that is secondary letting. And there's also a differentiation between the two types of property which can be used. So there's a dwelling house, which is a house which can be used for sort of normal habitation, a house with its own front door, kitchen, bathroom, etc., or unconventional accommodation, a pod, yurt, tent hut, of course. In Skye, you know all about pods. They're a big part of the makeup of these properties on the island. So there are two different categories of applicants. So this is there are existing hosts and new hosts. Now this is important in terms of who can operate just now. So existing hosts are people who have been running their business and accepting bookings before the 1st of October, which is when this scheme came in. And new hosts are, a new host is anyone who has started their short-term let business since the 1st of October. The reason those two categories exist is that anyone who's an existing host can continue to operate even if they haven't applied for a license up until the 1st of April 2023. Whereas anyone who's just starting their business just now, who wasn't operating before the 1st of October, they cannot start to let out their house until they have a license. So there's this sort of transitionary period between the 1st of October 2022 and the 1st of April 2023, which essentially gives existing operators time to make their application, but they can still let out their property lawfully. So in terms of the timescales that the council has, we have 9 months to determine application for a new host and 12 months for an existing host. These are very much maximum timescales. We seek to process applications as quickly and efficiently as possible. All short-term lets should be licensed, fully licensed, so existing and new operators by 1st of July 2024. Again, that's a date that's been set down by the Scottish Government. License lasts for a maximum of 3 years. Most of them will be for 3 years, after which time the license holder will have to apply to renew that license. And anyone who is operating without a license when they should have a license is committing a criminal offence. So the cost of the license, this is our table of fees. So you see it goes from £320 for a home shared or home let with 1 or 2 occupants up to £610 for secondary letting with more than 10 occupants. These fees are calculated. We're not legally allowed to make money or lose money on any type of licensing. So we have to calculate our fees to cover the cost of processing applications. So we have estimated how many applications we're likely to receive over the next 10 years, over the next 3 years, and how much it will cost us to process a license, and sort of divided that by that number. And then also the Scottish Government, we're encouraging local authorities to sort of make a scale rather than having one fee for any type of license. So that is how we have that's how we've spread out the cost. In terms of comparison, the only one I've really looked at recently in comparison is Edinburgh City Council, and their fees are much higher than Highlands. Their highest, so for what we charge £610 for, that would be our highest fee. Their highest fee is £5,800, and I think their lowest fees are around the same as us, but most of their fees are higher than ours. So that's something I think local authorities will have to keep under review as this scheme goes on, to see what our actual costs are, whether the fees need to be adjusted up or down as we go on in future years. There is also the opportunity for councils to grant temporary exemptions for specific events which are nominated within an area where we wouldn't require to have hosts to have a licence to provide short-term lets for, I guess, the duration of that event. Highland Council has opted not to allow these, but that will be kept under review. There's not seen to be any events of such a scale or regularity in any one part of the Highlands where that would be seen as necessary. And there's also an issue of if we think that if part of this is ensuring that properties are safe and suitable for habitation, then why should it make a difference for a major event or not? I know the kind of thing that this has been used for, speaking to a colleague in Fife Council who I think they were, I don't know if they put this in their policy, but they were considering using this for the Open Golf Championships, which is held every 5 years at St Andrews, and they know that happens. And there's such an explosion for that kind of couple of weeks of demand that they think that would be useful for them. We don't have anything of that scale in the Highlands, but as I say, that's something that we can keep under review and use if needed. So all licenses will be subject to conditions that the licence holder must adhere to. There are mandatory conditions which are set down in the legislation, which all licenses across Scotland will require to adhere to. There's also a set of additional conditions which have been agreed and set by the Highland Council. They've been agreed by Highland Licensing Committee, and they are kind of specific to the Highlands. A lot of them were, excuse me, a lot of them being drafted in consultation with primarily environmental health to ensure the sort of amenity of the property is kept up to standards. And the conditions can all be found at our website. Planning permission is a tricky part of this. Excuse me. A lot of the queries that we get just now are with regards to planning permission. So the Scottish Government also introduced new planning legislation alongside the licensing legislation. So planning and licensing are completely separate legal and regulatory functions of the council, and it can cause frustration, I think, for both sides and for applicants, not just for short-term let licenses and all types of licensing, but they sort of have to be kept separately. So the licensing legislation, as I've said, focuses on the safety and appropriateness of the property and whether the applicant is a fit and proper person. Planning legislation is designed to address the number of houses and flats being taken out of full-time occupation and used for short-term let accommodation, and allows councils to designate short-term let control areas. So the council is currently in the process of looking to designate Ward 20, Bainbridge Bay, as a control area, and that's currently with the Scottish Ministers for a decision. If a short-term let is in a control area, then and the dwelling house and the properties to be used for secondary letting, then they will require to have planning permission before they apply for a licence. If the property is not in a control area, then they do not need planning permission before applying for a licence. Now, the problem we have with advising potential applicants is that that's not the same as saying you do not need planning permission. You might need planning permission, you might not need planning permission, but from the licensing point of view, for any properties outside Bainbridge and Strathspey, they don't need planning permission as a prerequisite for a licence. If the planning service separately say you need planning permission, then that is an issue for planning and planning enforcement to follow up, but won't be an issue for the licensing team. So when we're processing an application, as I've said, there are essentially two things that we're looking at. Is the applicant a fit and proper person to hold a licence? And is the premises suitable for short-term let? And the sort of considerations that we take into account are listed there. And again, those are in the legislation. So firstly, how do we establish whether somebody's a fit and proper person? Essentially, we consult with Police Scotland. They do a background check on anyone who's named in the licence. So it's not just the applicant or the owner, it's the agent and also the day-to-day manager, to see if they have any previous convictions or if the police have any information that would cause concern for them holding a licence. So it's not the case that anyone with any kind of criminal conviction will not be a fit and proper person. It would have to relate to the activity involved. So, for example, someone with driving offences, sort of a number of road traffic offences, that wouldn't really be relevant to them operating a short-term let. Whereas if they were applying for a taxi driver's licence, that would be relevant. So these things are assessed according to the licence. But for short-term lets, we're looking at just any information that would raise concerns with regards to whether they're a fit and proper person for that. And then the premises, is the premises suitable? So we can establish a lot of that just from the information that we ask applicants to provide. We ask them to provide, gas safety certificates, electrical safety certificates, etc. But we also rely on the expertise of other services. So primarily, we consult with our own environmental health team and our own building standards services, and they will have a look at these applications to ensure the properties are suitable for being used as a short-term let. And the fire service are also consulted, and applicants are required to complete a fire safety checklist to assist the fire service, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, with that. Members of the public may also have information which is relevant, and they need to be given the opportunity to object or make representations. So for that to happen, applicants have to put a notice outside their property indicating that they've applied for a licence. The notice has to be there for 21 days and in a place that members of the public, passing neighbours, etc., can read it clearly so that they know how they can make an objection or a representation. So just in terms of, just to give you an idea of what we ask for applicants to provide, we ask for floor plans, which have to be sort of, well, we like them to be clear and to scale, kind of showing room sizes, fire escapes, all these kind of things to ensure that, for example, they're not trying to cram too many people into too small a property, that there are sufficient fire escape routes, etc. We also ask for site plans so we can see the location of the building within the wider area. How close is it to neighbouring buildings? Will that cause an issue? Electrical and gas safety certificates, appropriate insurance for public liability and building contents. And if they are saying they're an existing operator, we ask for evidence to demonstrate that they have been operating, that they have been taking bookings and payments before the 1st of October 2022. And then we also ask the applicants to declare a number of things within their application form. So these are declarations which there would be issues if they sort of be an offence to falsely declare any information on your form. So again, this allows our environment, health and building standard services just to reassure them that the customer or the applicant has taken into account all these things. And that they are aware of what their responsibilities are as an applicant. So if an application receives objections, so they could be from our consultees, police, fire, environment and health, then we first of all seek to resolve them as far as possible. So if environment and health have issues, there will be a sort of dialogue with the applicant to try and fix these. We'll work with applicants as far as possible to resolve any objections. So sometimes the issue may be something as simple as they haven't submitted an up-to-date electrical safety or electrical inspection condition report. That can be done, that can be rectified. Some objections aren't capable of being resolved in that way. So, for example, a police objection based on previous convictions, you can't really negotiate sort of out of that, or a neighbour complaining who has had issues before, or just they're vehement that they do not think it's appropriate for the property to operate as a short-term let in that place. In that case, the licensing team can't grant the application because of an objection, and we don't have the power to refuse applications. Only the Highland Licensing Committee has the power to refuse applications. So the application will go to Highland Licensing Committee, where members will determine whether a licence can be granted or not. Councillor Miller knows all about that, being one of the members of the Highland Licensing Committee. So in the most part, each property needs to have its own licence, but there are circumstances where multiple properties can come under one licence. So, for example, if you have a number of camping pods within your sort of property, you can apply for that under one licence. But it can be complicated depending on the type of property. Sometimes even if properties are on the same land, they might need different types of licence. So, for example, if you had an Airbnb if you had a traditional B&B, that would be a home share if you're living there while you have guests, but you may have pods in the grounds, which would be secondary letting. So there are two different types of licenses, so you'd need different licenses. So that's something that we can advise applicants. So quite often they'll come to us and they'll ask if they need two licenses or if they need multiple licenses or not, and we are happy to do that. So in terms of links, again, these will be circulated to you, but we have information on our website for licensing and for planning, and also the Scottish Government has published some detailed guidance, so the links to all that are there. We also have a dedicated email inbox, so that is stl@highland.gov.uk. So that's where all queries can come into there, and the appropriate member of staff can pick them up. So that's monitored pretty much constantly just now. So any issues can be raised there. Also, just in terms of the setup of the team, we've had to recruit new staff in order to administer this because it's such a big project, and we will have staff based in Wick, Inverness, Fort William and Portree. And that's where our admin staff will be, and they will be overseen by our licensing officer, Julie Traynor, and Gary Summers, our new solicitor, who's in the meeting as well, and they're both based in Fort William. So we have put everything in place, hopefully, to enable us to administer this smoothly. I know it's caused a lot of issues. I know a lot of the trade aren't happy about it. A lot of the trade are happy about it, and we've had a lot of people a lot of comments saying they're glad that there is regulation, and you'll see yourself just from the quick overview there that a lot of the things we require are things that you'd hopefully expect that responsible business owners would have in place anyway. And we're finding that applications that have come in quickly are clearly people who have had all these safety certificates, etc. in place already. So I will stop sharing my screen there, and I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Ian, thank you very much for that. Was really comprehensive, but I think it just shows the amount of information that we and of course short-term let people need to have. In terms of all that information, are we as a council putting together some kind of idiot-proof flyer? Because all that information really helped. So I'm just wondering, have we got something that is available to people? And I think you've said that you'll be sending us on the presentation anyway. So you can keep that one in your hipper, and I'll go to Councillor Stewart first.
No, thank you, John, and thanks a lot for the presentation. It was really good to get a sort of more general sort of overview of how the licensing's been like applied to the sector. But one of the questions I've got, so now that applicants are open and able to apply for the license, can you let me know sort of roughly how many have been received for the board? Because that's something you've got, and what sort of percentage this represents of the total number that you would be expecting to receive, just sort of understand what uptake there's been at this sort of early stage for Skye and Raasay. And the other thing is, I know through your presentation you were saying about exempt accommodation. So you said that premises which have a license to sell alcohol under the Licensing Scotland Act are exempt from the short-term lets license. Something that I've been getting asked quite a bit is like, so some bed and breakfast accommodation, especially here in Skye, they offer perhaps like a bottle of wine in a welcome hamper, and I appreciate that they need a license to do that. So are those bed and breakfasts, are they also exempt from the short-term let license by virtue of having the license to sell alcohol? And if so, has the council seen an increase of premises license applications since this scheme was introduced?
Okay, thank you. And we'll just get all the questions for Ian. We'll go to Drew next.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ian. Good presentation. I'm glad you're going to send it out to us, because I'm still confused and I'm on the committee. So if we go away from all the official sort of stuff here, like the unofficial B&Bs who have been operating for years, under the radar, should I suggest, in lots of cases anyway. I mean, how confident are you of picking them up with this new scheme? Because obviously it's the traditional couple of spare rooms. You stick people in there during the summer, and it's all very nice. People coming off the street, given on Skye especially, as you know, it's flooded with people who have arrived without even thinking of booking accommodation, and they see a sign and then they go. And so these are not really regulated in any sense. They don't have insurance. They don't have all the stuff that we're trying to address with the new policies. I mean, how confident are you you're going to catch them up with the new legislation? But you've got a big task, and maybe you've got an idea as well, without without looking at the unofficial ones. How many do we actually have on Skye? You may have said it, that I've missed it with all the information you were giving me. What is the total number for Skye that you have at the moment?
Okay, and finally, Councillor Monroe.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank Ian for his presentation. It was really clear, really useful. I did have a couple of questions, but your presentation has managed to answer them, Ian. So thank you. That's fine. Thanks so much.
Ian, questions from myself, Rudy, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, members. So first of all, in terms of communication with the trade, we've tried to be as proactive as we can in terms of the trade. So not just in terms of, I guess, working with corporate communications to ensure that sort of at each stage that we've got to, that we've got the information out on all of our communication channels with that. We've also been working with tourism bodies. There are a number of tourism bodies across the Highlands, including Skye, and we have had good relations with them and sought to work with them again to push out this information as far as possible. Over the summer, I was up in Skye. There was a meeting for the local self-catering association there in Sligocan, and I think those have been really helpful for sort of getting the word out as to what is required. So yeah, we are trying as much as possible to sort of push this out and to communicate it as widely as possible, and trying to communicate directly with the trade where we can. Councillor Stewart, I can get you that information. I don't have the ward breakdown just now. I think as of the start of last week, we had about 170 applications across the Highlands, but I can get the information for Ward 10 for you. The licensed premises. So yeah, any premises which has a alcohol license where accommodation is named as an activity on the plan doesn't need a license. The reason for that is it would be seen as double licensing. A lot of the requirements for the premises license would be similar to an alcohol license. We have seen some sort of small guest houses, B&Bs, applying for premises licenses, where maybe in the past we wouldn't, but it's not been a significant number, and it's not been the case where it's sort of we've seen it as particularly unusual. It's really for, I think, the operator of those premises to decide which is best for them. Because at the end of the day, there's still costs and fees for a premises license as well. There's an annual fee, so rather than for short-term lets, once you have your license, you have it for 3 years. You have to keep paying an annual fee for your premises license. So some cases it may be less expensive or less convenient, or more convenient in other circumstances. It might not. And then moving on to Councillor Miller. Essentially, as I said before, we're looking to sort of push the information as much as possible. But at the end of the day, operating a short-term let without a license is a criminal offence. So that, I think, makes it it's a lot much higher risk, I think, for people to operate in that way. I mean, previously they were doing nothing wrong because, as I said at the start, there's been no regulation of short-term let, so it wasn't an issue before. Whereas now they will be committing a criminal offence if they don't. Operators, once they have a license, they will be given a license number and they'll be required to display that. so it will be clear to people staying there whether they are licensed or not. So whether they are a legitimate enterprise for providing short-term let accommodation or not. I'm confident that for the most part we will. I mean, it would be the same for. We have similar issues for example, taxi drivers. There are circumstances where it's just difficult to regulate if someone is, unofficially operating as a taxi. But we work in consultation in conjunction with the police, and we're confident that for the most part, the vast majority of people who are seeking to operate short-term lets will seek to do so lawfully.
Okay, Ian, thank you very, very much. I think that was a fantastic presentation. As I say, we definitely need to see it again personally, and hopefully the fact that we have got an officer now in Portree will also support us as members as well if we're unsure of anything. So thank you very much, and we wish Gary all the best in his new post, and I'm sure we'll be speaking to him in the future. Okay, thanks Ian, and thanks Gary.
Thank you.
Chair, I'm seeing Alistair Danter's hand just gone up there.
Sorry, Alistair. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see it. Right, Alistair.
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking, if it's appropriate, if I just could say a couple of words. Just this is much for sort of Ian's benefit, but also yours as elected members. I am becoming aware in the last couple of weeks of that there is still a percentage of operators who are unaware of this legislation and who are sort of claiming a right to a mushroom tendency, should we say. And so I think there still is some work to do to get that information out there. We at Skye Connect, we've done as much as we possibly can. We put stuff out through a range of channels, but if it is possible, I think for the council to maybe put something in the free press, I think that would be helpful. Two areas where I think people are struggling, you mentioned it yourself, and that is the issue of planning permission, and I think it's the terminology. And I felt, as it were, what's the word? I have this experience myself, and thank you for your letter. It was very clear. I am now in the clear, but I think there's an issue with the terminology there on planning permission that is causing confusion, and I think that's a possible problem. And I think also, and this might seem a small one, but it's the position of the notice that you have to put out, as it were, to your neighbours, that you're applying for permission. In some instances, I think it's quite easy, but I think in sort of remote rural or sort of rural, I think that is a challenge as to what is actually appropriate. But just a couple of comments. I hope they were appropriate for this type of meeting and useful. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alistair. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ian. Unless we're in Bainach and Staspe, generally will not need planning permission.
Generally, yes. I think if you are, certainly if a house has planning permission and it's been operating as B&B, for a while, it's not likely that it's going to need planning permission. Unfortunately, I have to give maybe seen as a stereotypically lawyer answer, but I can't make a generalization like that. But certainly, what I can say is that you don't need to have your planning permission in place to apply for your license. So it may be that you have everything else in place. You can have discussions with the planning service and get clarification from them as to whether they feel you need planning permission. For example, if it's a new quite significant change of use. But in most, certainly from the queries that we've had in most circumstances, planning permission hasn't, or separate planning permission hasn't been required. It's obviously more complicated in Bainach and Strasbourg. Just touching on what Alistair said, yeah, that's quite right. We are aware that a lot of people don't know, still don't know that the West Coast appears to be a bit of a communication black hole. So yeah, thanks for that suggestion, and any other suggestions, and again, members as well, if you're coming across sort of particular areas, or just if you're coming across a lot of people who aren't aware of this, let us know and we'll do what we can. What I would say though is this has been in the this has been in the pipes for quite a few years now, and it's been quite high profile. And you know, I think people particularly if this is your business, you know, that there has been an awful lot of publicity about this, not just in the sort of communications, but just in the news in general. So we will do everything that we can to spread the news wider, but I will certainly take that on board.
Yeah, I think you're right, Ian. I mean, I think if people aren't aware, there might be a wee bit of burying the head in the sand, because certainly over the last 2 years it's been really, really high profile. And as you said, if that's their business, then I'm pretty sure they should have an understanding of that. But at the same time, there may be genuine circumstances, as Alistair's pointed out, so we need to be supportive of these people. Okay. Once again, Ian, thank you. Once again, Gary, see you soon.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, members.
Okay, members, we're getting there. A housing performance report. So Rory's with us. So straight over to you, Rory. We've had the 2 papers, so just go through both papers in the one introduction.
Thank you, Chair. I've got Jennifer Bruce with me, also Principal Housing Officer for Skye and Raasay, and between the two of us, I'm sure we can answer any of your questions you might have. So I'm presenting the housing performance report today and a supplementary report on homelessness, specifically related to Skye. But I'll go through the highlights. I won't read the reports out to you in great detail. I'm sure you've read them all. But in terms of the highlights, the repairs service is the day-to-day repair service is operating quite well. I'd say we've recovered largely from the COVID delays that were brought about by restrictions to service delivery. There are ongoing challenges, though, as I'm sure you're aware, with material supply, contractor availability, and building construction inflation as well. You'll note that Q4 from last year is blank. That is because of a change in systems, so we don't have reliable data at that systems changeover, but we've dealt with that, and the figures as at Q2 are accurate. You'll note that we've seen some slippage in void turnarounds. There's a couple of factors that influence that. In places like Skye, where you've got lower numbers of void relets, one property can have an outsized impact on the void performance. And we've seen that with a couple of properties in the Skye and Raasay area, where we've had it for a number of reasons. We've had delays in allocations. We've had a couple of properties that have been refused. Offers have been refused a number of times. And we've had at least one property where we were, for management reasons, holding it for a hospital discharge and things like that. And so where that happens, it has a bit of an outsized impact on the average performance in the smaller areas. We've also had an uplift in rent arrears, which is consistent across Highland. And I'm sure members will be aware of the cost of living pressures. I think we're starting to see that bite. And there's some ongoing monitoring that the local housing team will do with that to make sure people are accessing the right benefits, maximising their incomes. We work in partnership with the benefits teams, and in terms of making sure that people have got the right benefits and maximise their incomes, and they're actually prioritising their bills. The other thing is I think a big feature at the moment in terms of affordability is around energy affordability. And so we're making sure we're doing the right referrals to make sure people can afford to heat their homes as part of that. I won't go into detail on homeless presentations in this part of the report, because I think the supplementary report deals with that probably a bit more comprehensively. But you'll note that there's a significant caseload in Skye. The figures that we've used are a snapshot from the end of September. It's difficult to sort of say day to day what the position is unless you take a snapshot like this, because people move in and out of homelessness. But I think this is a fairly good representation of the position on Skye. There were at the time 54 active homeless cases, which is probably a bit of a testament to the Skye team's efforts in closing some cases, because they have been higher at various times. And so there's a fair bit of active work that goes on with that. You'll see in the homeless caseload there's a bit of a summary on what the family situations are or what the household circumstances are. But in terms of the bulk of them, there's 70% of that 54 were in employment on Skye at the time, and 65%. So it's not going to add up to 100% because people have multiple scenarios, had a family connection to Skye. All were resident in Skye at the time of presenting as homeless, of that caseload. Section 5 outlines some of the reasons for presentation. Similar to the caseload summary, people have multiple reasons for presenting as homeless, so the figures are not going to add up to 100%, and they'll can be significantly more than that. But the biggest contributing factor to people's homelessness has been a breakdown in a relationship, in a family relationship, either a partnered family relationship or or parents and child, or other family relationship. The average duration in homelessness as at the 30th of September, was it 31st of September? 30 days has September. Was 175 days in Skye, and the low turnover of lettable stock either in the private sector or social housing sector has contributed to that. But we do maintain people in temporary accommodation or through other arrangements where we can, and I'm sure Jenny can go into more detail on that side of things. But I'll stop myself there before I go too far and leave it with members for the opportunity to ask any questions they might have.
Okay, thanks, Rory. Thanks again for your report. I'll just go in with a couple of questions. The repairs one, I don't think there's any reason to be concerned there. In terms of the late time, I think I've now got a better understanding of that, and I think, as you've pointed out, one or two properties who take a bit longer can really impact it. And I think I'm now probably more aware of the, shall we say, the state of some properties that need to be relet and the huge investment in time and maintenance that is actually required to bring properties back in. So I've got a much better understanding of that now. And as you say, getting contractors, getting materials, because I think some of the properties that are sometimes vacated, I think people will be surprised how bad they are. The other question I've got is purchasing of homes. The council is trying to purchase homes from people wanting to maybe sell their houses that were previously council or social housing. Just, is there an uptick in Skye for that? And my last question is around about homelessness. I think our officers do a fantastic job. We are building lots of new homes on Skye, but with the completion of the various plans for houses in Slate and Killacken and in Broadford and eventually Portree, will we ever reach a situation where we'll not have so many homeless? Okay, I'll leave that with you and I'll go to Councillor Stewart.
Thanks again, John, and thank you, Rory. That was really a good report, and it was a very good presentation. It gave me quite a nice understanding of what's going on in the board. Just with the topic of the rent arrears that came up, that was a bit concerning, but I'm glad to hear that the welfare team seem to be getting involved at sort of early stage to make sure that people are getting what they're entitled to. You know, that's really reassuring to hear. And it's like looking at the sort of variations in it based by quarter. You know, I think what you were saying about the cost of energy, you know, is quite prudent to the issue. But something that concerns me about that is that 1 in 4 houses across the Highland region don't meet the minimum energy efficiency standards for social housing. And you know, obviously that's a pan-Highland figure, so it would be, do you know roughly sort of what percentage that is for our ward? Because, you know, obviously that's something that the council could sort of help improve. You know, I think, you know, if that is an issue, that's something that we as members can push for, to get the investment that we need to help our tenants out. You know, because as you said, there is increasing energy costs, so it's if that's something that the council can directly affect, and you know, it's something that we should perhaps be looking into a bit more. So have you seen a sort of correlation between sort of properties with higher rent arrears and a lower EPC rating?
Okay, and Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Rory, for the report. It's been a bugbear of mine for many, many years. The state of the houses that are left when people vacate their premises. I mean, have the council, are they doing or taking any steps to try and recover some of these costs from people who have no respect for the properties they're renting and move away? For many years, I've always compared it to anybody who they get marched out and they get marched into any new premises, and they have to be responsible for any repairs. I know the council don't do that, but I think I just wonder, have you made any inroads over, since I've been involved in the council in the last 6 years, for example, in trying to get some money back from these people, rather than the general taxpayer having to foot the bill, and then the people move into another council property somewhere else, and 3 or 4 years later the same scenario is repeated. And I just wonder if you've taken steps to do that. On the homeless thing, I understand the situation. I think it's a bit of a pity in some ways that we have a Highland-wide responsibility. So I'm glad to see in this instance, in this snapshot, that all the people who are on the homes are actually residing in the area at the moment, which I think is, in some ways, is good news. And I hope that perhaps will continue, because I think we have enough social problems here on the island without importing people from out with the ward. On the repairs, I just wonder, do you actually utilise some of the workforce with the housing association, for example, to help if you're struggling to get contractors for minor repairs, because we all know that they have a workforce as well. So I just wondered, do you work in partnership with them to help with some of the repairs? And the voids, I suppose the reason for a lot of the voids, if I picked you up correctly, are perhaps the amount of work that's needed to be done to properties when they're vacated. Thank you.
Hey, Councillor Monroe.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments. I mean, I've seen 2 or 3 or 4 of these reports from Rory and from Jenny, and it really helped me get a good picture of where we are in Skye and Raasay in this ward. And this is, again, it's just really helpful. 1 or 2 things. Rent arrears, we're talking about £100,000 rent arrears probably for the last, each quarter for the last year, more or less. Maybe not surprising in the current economic climate. We might see that, in fact, increasing, but just want to maybe pay tribute to our welfare team, because I know they are as good as anybody in any local authority in Scotland at getting council tax reductions and any other entitlements to our residents. So they have a really important part to play. I'm just looking at the homelessness graph there. I don't know, am I seeing a sort of autumn-winter off-season drop-off in the presentations, those presenting themselves as homeless? And it's that interplay between local hospitality, tourist businesses, workers, and maybe that's what we're seeing there. But the other thing is the private rental market. It seems to have dropped off, and there's 2 sides to that. There's the the perception that tenants have all the rights in this day and age, that all the rights belong to a tenant. Once they're in your property, you can't do anything. But I don't know if that's actually correct. But maybe you can give us a little indication of where the private rental market is, and are the legislation around that, is it making it more difficult for people to let properties into the private rental market? So just a couple of thoughts here. Thanks.
Okay, over to you, Rudy and Jenny.
Thank you, councillors. I'll work my way. I'll work my way through question by question, but I think some of it will. Some of you have got sort of similar questions, so I'll try and unbundle those together. When we're talking about the condition of our properties at void, we're conscious of that. We've seen an increase in the amount of void repairs that's required. There's a couple of things that do impact that. Some of that is related to the age of some of the properties themselves, but obviously, as councillors have noted, some of it is related to some tenancy issues that we experienced during the tenancy and the ability of the tenant to maintain their property. Where we are dealing with expensive repairs to properties at void, we do try and recover costs as much as possible. But I will note that sometimes in these situations, we're talking about very vulnerable people as well. So a lot of this has to do, a lot of what our action has to do with bringing in the right types of support for some what can be some very vulnerable and people with very complex issues. As a housing service, we're not able to do that without partnering with our colleagues in adult social care, for example, in some situations. And I'll use the example of someone who might be experiencing a hoarding disorder or a squalid living type disorder. It's not always as simple as just holding someone fully responsible for that, unless you can get the right sort of support in place. We've had a couple of cases of that. Some of these have been quite high profile, but we've done our best to manage that sensitively with the person who's involved, while also not losing sight of the cost to our tenants, because the money for these repairs and clearances comes from our tenants' rents. So we are conscious of it, and we do manage the housing revenue account with that in mind. Much like rent arrears, early intervention is key. And sometimes, these cases can fly under the radar for quite a while. But in answer to some of the question, yes, we do try and recover costs, but it's not always possible in all circumstances, and they can be quite expensive. They can be quite significant. The Councillor Finlayson asked about purchasing homes. Yes, we regularly troll the market for properties that might become available that would suit us. Not every property that's on the market would suit us, so we are a little selective about that. We have advertised for people to bring their homes to us if they want to sell. We've had people approach us directly because they would rather sell to affordable let than into the private market for their own reasons of conscience. And the other side of that is, if we are looking at a property, we've got cost benchmarks to meet as well. So when we do make an offer, the property seller is not under any obligation to accept our offer. We're not talking about a compulsory purchase. And so, in that respect, in a lot of cases, we're competing with the rest of the market. And what we're trying to do is achieve best value increase the amount of stock that we've got of the right sorts to sustain tenancies for people who are on our housing register. I don't know if this was a rhetorical question, Councillor Finlayson, but you're asking whether we would reach the situation where we don't have as much homelessness. I really hope so. I absolutely sincerely hope so. But yeah, I think it's there's a multiple markets in this. We've got the private market has a huge part to play in this, and so having a vibrant private market would be a step in the right direction. We are building homes, so ultimately the goal is to reduce homelessness. Aspirationally, I'd love to see it get down to zero, so that it didn't exist. But that's what we're working towards, and we're taking steps to increase the volume of affordable housing to exactly that end. Councillor Stewart asked a question about the energy efficiency standard for social housing and the fact that 1 in 4 houses across Highland don't meet EISH. I'm going to have to go away and do a bit of research on what that means in the Skye and Raasay ward. I think it was a very good question about how that correlates to our rent arrears. I don't know if we can get down to that granularity of information, but I'd be happy to get that information and provide that to councillors outside the meeting once I've got it. And Councillor Miller, you also asked about the state of the houses, but also about repairs and whether we utilise the Lacouche and Skye workforce. It depends on the situation. Where we've done a refurbishment project, I'm aware of situations where we've actually used Lacouche and Skye to project manage on our behalf, because they've got the local resource to be able to manage that and deal with that within their own contract framework as well. So it's not a general arrangement, but we do certainly make use of Lacouche and Skye for project work. So I hope that answers that part of the question. But you also noted the Highland responsibility on homelessness. I think it's fair to say that every area's got its pressure, and most areas' pressures are quite unique to that area. In terms of the volume of homelessness in relation to the available stock, so that's including turnover and the amount of stock, I think Skye would have to be one of the most pressured areas. So it'd be quite unique. It'd be quite a unique situation for Skye to have the capacity to take on people from out with Skye, I'd have to say. And in my mind, it might actually be good news if that ended up being the case for Skye, because it would mean that there was less local pressure on Skye. But I think that's probably a discussion that we could have around that. Councillor Munro noted that the upticks in the performance report on Skye, and I've tried to. I would love to be able to predict it like that. I've tried in other areas to sort of just see if there's a quarterly range, so that we could get a seasonally adjusted trend. I don't know if I'm clever enough to have actually been able to predict like that. It's quite possible that that we see an uptick where there's where the seasons adjust because of tourist trade and things like that. But I couldn't say that with any confidence really. But it's worth considering specifically in places like Skye. And you commented on the drop off in private rentals and asked for some information on the impact of legislation and regulation on private rentals. Anecdotally, I've heard this from private renters that is seeing people out of the market. I think there's some work to be done on analysing that, and I think there's work to be done around the country on that sort of thing. We do have a private sector officer. I've since poached him back to work in investment, so that post is vacant at the moment. But we will be recruiting someone to be looking specifically at private sector, at the private sector, and that involves liaising with the private sector, bringing empty homes into use, and coming up with creative solutions on the private sector. And I think we've had some success with that, but it has to be tempered with the view that there's a macro issue, and each of our successes have to do with an individual landlord or an individual property. But I hope I've managed to capture everyone's questions there. If I've missed anything, please let me know.
No, I think you've covered it, things comprehensively there. I'm conscious, Jenny, is there anything you want to add? Or no, we're happy that Rory's covered everything. Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. So Jenny and Rory, thank you very much for your report. And hopefully we'll keep building houses and we'll see less people homeless as the time goes on. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
Okay, members, we're moving on to the Straw Progress Update Report. I think we all recognise this is a really good news story, and I'm delighted to welcome Alan Gunn to our committee today. Alan's the ECO for Communities and Places, but he's been heavily involved along with Matt and Amy. And before I hand over to Alan, I'd just like to compliment and thank the team for the great work that they have done over the last couple of years, when we've taken an idea and we've actually made it a reality, and hopefully we're going to do so much more going forward. So welcome, Alan, over to you.
Yep, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the kind words from myself and the team. It genuinely is a team effort, Chair, and it's certainly not just a team effort between the officers. I think what's really good is a team effort between members, officers, and most importantly, the communities. It's everybody working together. So I too am very grateful for the support and ongoing support that we've had. So members, what this report provides is an update on the progress on the report that was approved back in November 2021. Following the approval of the detailed business case, the project commenced in January 22, operating very much to a project governance board chaired by myself and jointly led by Matt Bailey and Willie McKinnon, the ward manager. Further background on that governance is set out in section 4, and such governance is important because what it does do is then, if there are any issues of concern, they can be identified more quickly and also resolved as well. In terms of looking to increase the on-site resourcing, section 6 covers this in more detail, and also the benefits of on-site resource, including, and very importantly, increased local employment opportunities, which is discussed in more detail at section 11 as well. Members, in June 22, a member of staff commenced, and a further one FTE commenced in October 22 to support the on-site resourcing within the store car park. Due to the exposed nature of the site, we've also provided a cabin as a shelter for our staff in adverse weather conditions to support their welfare. But I think it also, for me as sponsor for this programme, members, sends a message that this isn't just about money. This is about supporting the welfare of our people and supporting the communities they're in. We've also secured funding from the Islands programme to install 2 electrical vehicle connections at the site, and further work is required to install the actual charging stations, and an update will be provided at future area committee. In relation to the actual management of the site, in order to continue to improve the service we provide to customers and to ensure that the site remains self-sustaining for the future, it is proposed in section 7 that the parking charges are reviewed and implemented as a single charge with effect from April 23. This charge can support a number of aspects such as access to parking, toilets, chemical waste disposal facilities and the general upkeep of the path network. I think importantly as well, members, there are no changes recommended to the £10 monthly charge for the local parking season ticket for Skye car parks. But if members are minded today to approve the proposals, this change in pricing strategy would provide an estimated income of between 50 to 90k. And just to anticipate the question from the chairs where I think it would fall, my gut is towards nearer the 90k rather than the 50. In terms of digitisation and digital parking booking and the world of digital as it continues to develop, a website and social media site are under development for the store and will go live shortly as detailed in section 8. The intention is to develop a digital booking and parking management system, and hopefully that will ease some of the pressures on existing parking provision with that in terms of that digital and again parking booking spaces in advance. But similar to the message about the cabin we sent to staff members, this is about trying to continue to develop the store as a quality visit and overall site for everybody. In terms of the retail module in store, I'm delighted to say that through the great help of Willie, Matt and Amy in particular, supported with staff in Morecambe McLeod service, we secured funding of 420,000 from the Islands Infrastructure Fund to install the retail unit. There are many benefits that can arise from this investment, and these are detailed in sections 10 and 11. As it stands just now, members, I'm advised by our colleagues in Property and Housing Service that the construction of the retail unit is expected to complete in about autumn 2023. In terms of e-commerce and the continuing the theme of digitisation, the store, what we want to do is take the store retail experience and offer it online, as that it provides significant opportunities for income diversification. Establishing an online shop also offers a digital shop window for local craftspeople, and this is discussed in more detail in section 12. Talking of developments, in addition to those being carried out by Highland Council, there is further work at the site supported by various local partners, which is detailed in section 6 and 13. And for me, members, this is a classic case of this has been done for the community, with the community, and in the community. Officers and the partners continue to work collaboratively, and that approach will continue. So looking right to the future then, members, as part of the ongoing development of the store, there is a commitment to identify further developments and initiatives to continue to enhance the site. Further reports will be taken to this committee in due course. So members, thank you for your time. Thank you for the kind words, and the recommendations are shown at section 12, and I and my colleagues are happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alan, for that comprehensive report, and I think it articulates the journey that we've been on. And the comments from myself are really about the successful partnership work that has taken place. I'm sure there are very few projects across Highland that had ARTIF funding, LEADER funding, funding from SCRIPID, Natural Cultural Heritage funding, Islands Infrastructure funding, and of course, area committee funding. And I think that's what's really important, that we have also invested in the project. And we've taken it, as I say, right from the start to where we are now. So I think that's really, really important. I think the section about weddings and you know the future income generation potentials, I think we really need to focus on these as we go forward, because there are lots of opportunities here. And I think the fact that we're going to be able to produce Skye merchandise produced by local people and also create additional jobs, I mean, it's nothing for me but a good news story. So when we come to the recommendations, I'm sure we will all agree them. But again, I'd just like to say that we need to remember about the whole site management, and we need to make sure that the income generated at the store is invested back into the site. And absolutely your final comments there about let's have more ambition, let's have more forward thinking in the years ahead, because I think we can continue to make this not only an iconic site, but also a site that brings income back into the island. So I'd like to thank you, Alan, and the team once again. I'll go to Councillor Monroe now.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have much to say following your own contribution, and I don't have any questions because really we've been kept abreast of this all the way through for over a year, and it's been really exciting. There's been a good relationship with officers, with local members, and that's at the key. That's at the heart of how we're going to take this forward in the future too. We've given Gaelic language and culture its rightful place. It's really important, and that does reflect. People see that. People notice that in our. This hasn't been done in a half-baked way. It's been done properly. That's clear. We've been step by step. Every step's been measured, thought out, and that's what it's got to be. Really, what we've got here is an example of fantastic practice of that collaboration, and really what we said early on. This can be a model for Highland, and really could be a model for Scotland, and how we offer a iconic site and give it its rightful level of work and investment, which will make it really an outstanding place. So thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miller.
Yeah, nothing really to add, Chairman. The report's good, and I think we'll have further discussions. I don't want to say anything to spoil the mood at the moment, so I think we'll just be happy to support the recommendations that are in front of us.
Okay, Councillor Stewart.
No, again, I'm very happy to support the recommendations. There's been a lot of work put into it, and as you said, Alan, it's something that the communities evidently came along with, and that's good to see that there has been that level of engagement throughout the process. And I think the quality of the work done just attests to the time and effort that's been put in by everybody involved. So as John likes to say, this is definitely a positive, good news story, I think. So I'm happy to support the recommendations.
Okay, members, so we're going to confirm 60k investment from disaggregated ward funds as agreed in principle, pending the funding grant from the Islands programme towards the delivery of on-site management and income generation at the store through this report to the Isle of Skye and Raasay Area Committee. And we're going to agree and approve the updated parking charges for the store. Are we agreed, members?
Agreed.
Okay, so Callum, Amy and Matt, that's probably one of your easier reports to an area committee. Everybody's delighted with what's happening and the direction of travel that we're taking. I don't know if you want to say anything final, Alan, or Matt, or Amy.
I think just on behalf of the three of us, thank you, John. I mean, Matt and I were asked about this, a year and a half ago, and sometimes just being asked to lead it was meant a lot, actually, to be honest. And Matt and I, we've worked together on a few projects. This is certainly one of is right up there, John. I'm really grateful for their help, but fundamentally, I keep repeating myself, it's members, communities and staff working together. And when you have that collaboration, success is much more likely to be delivered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Yeah, and it was just to echo what Councillor Monroe said, that I think what makes this both enjoyable but also getting through to area committees, the way we've obviously responded, or the committee has responded today, is because of that close engagement. There's no surprises. People are kept informed. These solutions are developed, collaboratively. So I know Amy would, I'm sure, say this. I thoroughly enjoy that, and it's an enjoyable experience, but also we make good progress. So it's a model feature. Yeah.
Okay, so right at the very beginning, when we had this idea, I said I'd be walking about one day with a store t-shirt, and it's still my ambition. And hopefully next summer I'll be showing it off. So thank you all very much indeed, and no doubt we'll have ongoing conversations about the next stages.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, members, we're moving on to the last item on our agenda, Skye and Raasay Access Forum, and we've got Mark Crowe with us, and he's going to give us a presentation on the great work that's been taking place. So over to you, Mark.
Good afternoon, members. I'm conscious that this might be the graveyard shift, so hopefully it's not too long for you. And if I go through this presentation, you can ask questions at the end, or if you just want to clarify a point as you go through, just unmute and shout, please, rather than have to go back. Right, I'll share this. And let me know if you can see, and hopefully this will switch to slide.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so I know it says in the committee agenda the local access forum, but it wouldn't take me very long to explain the local access forum. So I thought I'd just give a bit of background on the forum, outdoor access, and it's applicable to Skye and Raasay. So Land Reform Act, Land Reform Scotland Act, or as I'll abbreviate it to LRSA, it gives the general public widespread access rights over land and water in Scotland, provided they do so responsibly. Very, very liberal access rights we have. Alongside that, and expanding on the access on the Land Reform Scotland Act, we have the Scottish Outdoor Access Code, which is written and held by Nature Scot, and that defines three key principles which are the basis for all of our responsible access rights. So that's respect the interests of others, care for the environment, and taking responsibility for your own actions. Whenever we're looking at access cases or access disputes, we come back to those three key principles. The Highland Council have a duty under the Land Reform Scotland Act, Section 13, to uphold access rights in their local area. Also, under Section 25 of the Land Reform Scotland Act, local authorities had a duty to establish local access forum. The purpose of those forums is to encourage dialogue amongst a broad range of parties involved within access. They serve to discuss local access issues, seek to help provide guidance, direction and resolution to local access disputes, and also to help develop and promote responsible access within their local area. So Skye and Raasay Local Access Forum aims to meet late autumn and early spring. And the forum itself comprises of the following representatives: 3 land managers or landowners, 3 access users who represent a particular access body, 3 community representatives, a rep from the access panel, elected member from Ward 10 and a deputy if the primary member can't make it, and Ward 5 elected member, given it covers Skye and Raasay. Also under Land Reform Scotland Act, the council had a duty to draw up a list of core paths which would give the public reasonable access throughout their area. Core paths are similar in their status to public rights of way. However, their status is protected under Land Reform Scotland Act, whereas rights of way are common law. Core paths, however, are not like adopted roads that we have in the council. We don't have any ownership of them or any duty to maintain them, although we do have powers to go and undertake maintenance. Our main power, though, or a duty, is to ensure that paths are free from obstruction and access isn't prevented. We have a very small corporate budget that seeks to deal with essential repairs, maintenance and waymark, and we often try to use that in partnership with a community or a landowner. I thought I'd cover a little bit about access pressures that we face, particular to our area. People counter data at Store, Fairy Pools and recently the Kerrang have demonstrated a dramatic rise over the last decade in footfall. Indeed, The people counters that our predecessor Donald Kennedy had to put in 2012-13 have been really instrumental in helping some of the recent funding bids and justification for spend. Paths which historically on Skye were relatively low use are now subject to intensive daily use all year round, and a lot of that's come from information on the web and apps that people use to find paths and walks. Many of these paths were originally formed by use rather than being constructed, and they're now suffering from erosion and drainage problems, which gives rise to new multiple routes forming, what we often call braiding. Previously built paths that were built, particularly some of the ones in and around the Coolan 25-30 years ago, are now suffering from a bit of a lack of maintenance. Typically, our paths, the maintenance falls to volunteer effort, or if we can get it, one-off funding. So I thought I'd just give you some representation of that to give that a bit of context for you. So I've extrapolated, I've looked at, that's actual data we've got up until the end of yesterday, and looked at a forecast for the next 2 months for this year. At the Kerrang, we had one set of data from 2015, and we put a people counter in right at the beginning of July this year. So the data for the Kerrang there is only from July onwards. But you can see from 2015, which I've used as a benchmark year, how everything rose significantly up to 2019, dipped a wee bit in 2021, and then in 2022, we're back up to similar levels to what we've seen in 2019. The store was always the first place that increased exponentially in popularity, and then coming up and joining it with a very similar level of visitor numbers now as the fairy pools. I'd expect the Kerrang on a full year's data to be somewhere around 150, 160,000 visitors. And you can see from often the timing of that people who visited the store often then move on and go to Kerrang. But you'll see from the figures in the percentage rise there, quite a significant increase that we've got in the space of 7 years. Got a list here of recently completed pathwords, and I've got some photos as well to show. So this year we've finished off Garifad to Staff and Slipway, which is a core path that runs from the back of Columba over the hill and down to Slipway. Also, we've done more work, and now we've more or less done all of the work that needed to be done for a path from the Shoolester Road end out to Ruhunish before the cliff path. Both of those schemes were 50-50 funded. 50% came from Highland Council, 50% came from Skirbid. We resurfaced the path from the bridge at Broadford, the footbridge, out to the pier. That was an aspiration of Broadford and Strath Community Company, and they sourced a bit of funding, and we added about twice as much to that, and there was a cracking job done on that path. Duntulm Castle, we've put a new path from the road down through the gate and part the way in, and we've put some new gates in there to tidy up, and that's had a significant increase in the amount of people going to the castle, and we'd like to look at partnering with the community to do some work there in the castle, and that was funded just from a day's filming fee that our film unit managed to get. There is work going on what is an informal path, but has been much used from the viewpoint at Lailt down to the shore. That's actually, I've put 50% completed, but that's nearly complete now, and that's all been funded by Skirbid with some support from ourselves. Equally, Brothers Point has had some work done on it, and there is more work planned there. This is a couple of pictures from the work at Staffin, The top picture's just coming up from the slipway and heading up to the hill. It's quite a historic path that goes up over the top of the hill, stone pitched, an old cart track for taking goods from the slipway up to the village. And the second picture below, that's a recently built stone drain just underneath the wall, the Garifard wall, heading back down to Columba. This next picture, this is right out towards Ruhunish, so quite far from the road. And the material that we've used there to do the path was won locally in borrow pits. So hopefully when you go up there, you've got a nice dry surface now, but you would never know where we took the stone from. And also the creation of a path means that people tend to follow it without any way marking, where previously they would just follow what looked like cattle or sheep tracks. And this is the Broadford path, back in the middle of the summer. Really nice surface now and well drained. And there's not too many scenarios out in our paths where you could use Skye marble and it would fit in, but I think that looks okay. And finally, this is, it doesn't look very much, but people were walking everywhere down to the gate at Duntullum, and the gate was falling apart. Stock was able to get in and out. So that's helped the local crofters and provided a bit of a definition as to how to get down and away to the castle. Other stuff that's going on, the Kerrang Viewpoint Path, which was funded through Skye Iconic Sites Partnership, that's been completed. The Store Photographers Knoll Path and Habitat Restoration, you've just been talking about all the work at the store, and that hasn't got much more to be done there now to complete a made path out, and the habitat restoration work is largely done as well now. Brookside to Fanks core path, Edinburgh Community Company have funded out their own funds, an improvement over that 2.5 kilometre length, largely of old road, but they've removed gates, placed cattle grids, resurfaced sections, surfaced new bits of path, and undertaken some masonry work to some old stone bridges, and that's now going to be a really good, enjoyable, active travel path in Edinburgh. Ferrypool bridges were put in earlier this year. They're being well used now. We're also looking to do some work on the Talisker to Fiskevig core path alongside the North Talisker Grazings Committee, who have sought funding from Improving Public Access. The Coral Beach, Skirpid have a proposal and a plan fund in partnership with the Highland Council, put a new car park in place this winter, and there's also funding from Skirpid to put in place a much better path out to the Coral Beach. The Kerrang Loop, Meal Surmark, we'll talk about pressures, and I'll show you a photograph of that in a moment. Since that area has become more known and people follow apps and maps now online, more and more people are walking that full loop, and the hill itself and the way off is suffering from a lot more erosion and damage. There is some money which is an underspend from CISP, which is going to cover some work there, and we're putting a bid in for some funding to deal with some major erosion on the face coming off Meal Surmark. Elgin Community Centre to Store Harbour, Elgos Community Centre and the shop down to the harbour. The community have a path project on there that we're working and supporting them with. They have ARTIF funding, and they've planning application granted and a tender process out now to get a path in there so that you don't have to walk down the road. Lisagary, Nature Walk and Patree and Mill Pond, got a bit of partnership work going on there. Local company Power Arb have done some vegetation clearance and some tree work. Criminal Justice have agreed to do some path resurfacing work for us, and we are, through our environment team, Alistair Stewart, replacing a bridge there as well. So So a lot of stuff going on, and we're also talking with the Gaelic Primary School about funding to improve the platform at Mill Pond. Path at Portree allotment, working with Portree and Braes Community Trust to look at a path around the allotment, which will give a much nicer route from the co-op all the way down to the village, down the river. There's 1.4 kilometres of path to go in the fairy pools this winter, and Skye Cycleway have aspirations as well to open up new active travel links. So there's a lot going on at the moment. You might recognise this local worthy at the fore of the photograph here. But this is just an example of what the footfall can do to an area. So this is multiple routes that are formed coming down towards the Coral Beach. So our plan is to make that into one 6-foot wide path going down and following the shoreline out and trying to restore that area of vegetation that's been lost. And similarly at the Kerrang, not only does footfall cause erosion through the nature of the people's feet taking the vegetation away, it forms a drain. The path becomes a drain, and this is what happens. And you can just probably see from the guy on the right there, there's some of those ruts going down that face that are nearly waist deep, and that's happened in the last 6-7 years. It's happened really quickly. So we're trying to work in partnership as well at the moment to get some funding to look at making a path there and restoring the erosion. So finally, other things we're doing, we've worked with Skye Adventure to start to get together a volunteer group that will monthly meet and go and undertake some path maintenance work. And that's, we've had 4 weekends now. I think our 5th weekend is coming up. We get 6 to 10 people come out each time. It's good crack. Working with Portree and Braes Community Trust and the Community Council to look at establishing path networks and looping some routes, and similarly in Broadford and Strath, working with them to look at similar things down there. Slate, following some access issues locally that were flagged up, trying to work with Clandonald Land Trust to look at improving some access down around Slate. And there's a number of wind farm developments suddenly coming on tap. So just trying when they come through to seek as much access improvement as possible that we can get out of those developments, both directly and indirectly funded by them. And that is a picture of a nice day earlier this year where we started the path maintenance on the Corrylagan path at Glenbrittle. So any questions, members?
Mark, thank you very much. That was a very impressive presentation, and I think members now are aware just of the breadth and the amount of work that you're doing, and it's fantastic to see. And I think it's important to also reiterate that, you know, we here as members as well, with our own disaggregated budget, I'm sure we'll be keen to support some of the projects that are going to happen in the future. But it's a lot of great work. But I think what's really come across to me is how quickly erosion can happen when you showed that picture at the Kerrang and in such a short period of time, and the actual devastation that happens. But all I can say is more power to your Elba. Fantastic work. I'll go to Councillor Monroe and then Councillor Miller. Callum.
Thank you, Chair. Just to thank Mark for that presentation. It's really fantastic, and there's so much going on in their ward. And Mark, your role in coordinating this is crucial. You couldn't do this without working in partnership with several of the groups you've named, so that's key to it. We had a really good presentation earlier on about active travel and a master plan for Portree, and all that fits into it's active travel, it's getting people on bikes, on foot. So yes, if we can support any of these in any ways, we will do our best to do so. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and thanks to Mark. it's almost mind-boggling amount of work that's actually going on or been going on in our ward. So it's fantastic. I'm actually now starting to get a bit excited about the first meeting on Wednesday of the Access Forum. I was a wee bit sort of apprehensive, so what have I let myself in for here? But no, I think I am looking forward to Wednesday's meeting now. And yeah, what John mentioned, the erosion there. I mean, I've seen it firsthand myself over the last couple of years when I've been involved in touring and whatever. And it's quite scary, the amount of damage that's been done by human beings, the fairy pools especially, the Kerrang as well, because I always go up the Kerrang with people, and it's got worse noticeably over the last probably 3 or 4 years even, the amount of damage. So if we can do as much as possible to improve the situation, then yeah, we have to do that, because people coming for the first time need to get the same experience as people got when they came 4 or 5 years ago. So the store itself, I mean, I was up there probably 5 or 6 years ago, just as an example, and it was horrendous, absolutely horrendous, the amount of devastation that had been caused by the visitors going up there. And then I was up again, I think it was early this year, and the improvement, it's unbelievable. And I would recommend the other councillors to go and have a walk up one day if they've got time, just to see the excellent path network. It's absolutely superb. So yeah, power to your elbow, Mark, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on Wednesday face to face. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Sorry, just to say to Councillor Miller, yes, other members have been up the store, so don't worry about that. And we could even have a members' picnic up there one day. Who knows? Okay, last word to you, Mark.
I was actually thinking of a site meeting, but maybe there's an opening ceremony to be done up on the photographer's knoll path anyway. So if we could just try and pick a day when it's not blowing a hoolie or absolutely tranching it down, that would be good.
That's okay. That's a date. You keep an eye on the forecast, and we'll be there. But the final comment I think is important to make is to yourself, certainly from the community groups that I work with and where work has been done. I think they're really, really pleased with having you in post, because you're easy to communicate with, you engage well with them, and unbelievably, you also managed to get a few pounds. So that's good news too.
Yeah, thanks very much. Well, yeah, just bear in mind when you get these things coming through, I appreciate there's a stress on all funding streams, and it isn't statutory, but it's not always what you can see when you're driving around from visitor pressures, but it's what's beyond and happening. And if I can keep flagging them up and keep trying to find some solutions, then yeah, that's what we'll do.
Okay, once again, Mark, thanks for your time. I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, members, that brings us to the end of our area committee. Thank you all for your contributions.